children, we have all gathered here tonight to make worship of thy holy Amico.
I said she sucks. Right. You're taking it as a negative. The stream's not dark enough. I had to come and make it dark. You guys are doing awful being too PC here.
One thing we're not going to do is we're not going to become the Ouya. We understand that content's going to drive this system. John,
can you say that a little louder for the idiots in the back?
Would you consider being the Ouya 2, 3?
If I like it, I'll tell you. If I don't, I'll tell you. Lots of love. Oh. It's not good.
If anybody ever,
I want something.
We're just
shrimp here.
Yes. DJ, come on.
And I'm not yelling at you. I'm just saying.
Yes, you are.
I am amped. I'm
Oh, it's over. I gotta stop dancing. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the season finale of Amico After Dark. And I say season finale because after tonight's episode. Wait,
it's a cliffhanger.
How much have you drunk already? Two. That's
good
all
God,
just
man.
Two. What am I doing? What am I doing tonight with myself? Goodness gracious. We've got a heck of a show, season finale. We're gonna take a 4-week break after this, but we have probably. I mean, we've had Phil. By the way, Phil Adam in the chat. By the way, we have a new member announcement. Phil Adam. I think he only did this because he made the intro. So I think he maybe feels like he owes me a little bit. But Phil, thank you for being. Phil is now part of the Bro Force, an official bro. So thank you very much for the channel support.
Right.
My
When
brother,
we're
Goes up to every meeting
without
without sleeves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we have a full chat tonight, guys. Awesome. Thank you for being here. We have John Alvarado, the mythical John Alvarado. I'm saying that right.
Ladies and gentlemen,
we're gonna find out if he's real tonight. I'm gonna pour this one because I said in the Discord for everyone in the chat. Every time there is a good mustache pun, a whiskey shot will be had. So,
wait. We have to quantify good now?
Yeah. Listen, because for if I did every one
all night,
We have to qualify. You don't have to quantify. He'll be quantifying them.
Now if he's drunk, it's a much better way to qualify it. Anything could go.
That's true.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll have
once we get one or two good jokes in there, he's going to be too drunk to tell if they're good or bad.
We'll have the chat vote on it.
All right.
So, but we've got a good guest tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen.
But he needs to come in with a we need a song, right? We have to have an introductory song for the gentleman that we are having on.
And here we were going to do like a serious interview for once.
It's
going off the rails.
It'll be serious. It'll be serious after this. Let's get to it.
You men who long for love, you mustn't all despair.
Oh God, I know this.
Capture the hearts of the fair. You may not have the look, you may not have the dash, but you'll win yourself a girl if you've only got a mustache.
It's from 1,000 Ways to Die in the West.
Yes.
Oh no,
Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh no.
By way of his mustache. John Alvarado.
Oh, I gotta start drinking.
Gotta give you that one.
Thank you for that introduction. That was awesome.
So, John, you are I hope I get this right because it's in the thumbnail. Senior technical software developer. Is that right?
Software technical director.
Yeah,
that's close.
Or as Tommy said to me earlier in DM, or STD, as he said.
Yeah, that's how he remembers it. For the longest time, he couldn't get it straight every time, and then someone pointed out it's STD, and he's okay. Got it.
Yeah.
He gets.
I'm gonna remember it now. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
Man, it's great to finally meet you.
Thank you.
It is
Pleasure
fantastic
be
to
here.
meet you.
Talk to you guys.
It's been
After all of this, you are the prior technical senior director, PTSD.
Oh man.
It only gets worse, John. I hope you've got yourself buckled in.
It's gonna get weird.
Oh my goodness, Nick and I will be here to ask you the serious stuff. Don't worry.
Right. Will we though? Will we?
That's a good point. So, no, it's not. Hey, you have been in just about everyone's chat at some point. And it's been awesome to get to know you, kind of digitally. So, meeting you tonight, it comes full circle, and I know we really appreciate you having you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here, and it's fun participating in the chats as well. I'm always really concerned though about how much I should say. Like, am I saying too much? Am I revealing something that shouldn't be said yet? So, but I feel pretty comfortable tonight. Based on talking with Tommy about the kinds of things, the latitude I have to talk about.
Well,
yeah, don't worry.
Yeah,
you're in allied territory, so no worries. We're still going to try and ask you some hard questions.
Cool.
You ordered the code red, didn't you? No.
I hope there are no math questions.
No.
Oh, no. Why am I here?
Right. So, well, before we go to the technical stuff, I wanted to ask you if it's all right. In television's only part of your story, and I wanted to get this kind of out first. For 13 years, you worked for In Exile,
Correct.
right? And
yes, for Brian Fargo.
Yeah. So, what was that like?
Wait, what is that? I don't even.
In Exile is a development studio that did Wasteland, and they're an RPG centric studio.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Right behind me on the shelf is the Wasteland 2 box signed by the team. Nice. So I worked on that game. I was the lead developer at the end there. I was the technical director there at In Exile. And the first game we did there was the Bard's Tale, the comedy remake of the Bard's Tale. Okay. And that was a lot of fun. Probably one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on. We were just having laughs all the time. That was
a great series.
Writers came up with. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. But we joined my longtime business partner and I joined In Exile after wrapping up our own company that we had for about 7 years called Big Grub. Mm-hmm. And we were making PlayStation 1 games and PC games back in the day, and doing some work for Interplay, which is Brian Fargo's previous company, doing some work for them and for Shiny Entertainment, and kind of helping out with some projects in firefighting, and then doing some of our own original titles. So that's how we got to know Brian, and eventually we were talking to them about maybe doing some work for them, some additional contract work like we did with Interplay, and then they basically said, why don't you just join us? And my wife at that time encouraged me and my partner, Brandon Humphreys, who was the art director at Big Grub, to take the offer, because we had not been making a lot of money running our own company. So she was kind of tired of that. So we wound down the company, and because this was just at the point where the industry was transitioning to PlayStation 2, and we were going to have to lay out a bunch of cash to get development kits, and we didn't have the cash, so we'd have to borrow it, I guess. But so we made probably the wise decision to wind it up and joined In Exile, the two of us. So yeah, that's how that started.
And you also had some. Go ahead, Reb.
Oh, you're also you got your hands in like every role when you were running a company like that. So
it
was probably a wise decision on your part.
Yes, a lot of experience gained there, and a lot of appreciation for all the different aspects of running a business, which comes in handy later when you're working for someone else. It just gives you another perspective.
Now, you were also involved in some games at Shiny.
Yes.
Cool Spot, Gex, Shadowgate, I believe.
None of those. None of those are Shiny games.
So,
none of those are Shiny games.
Those are Virgin.
Not Shiny games, right? Virgin games. Sorry, Virgin.
Right.
Virgin, somehow I get that mixed up with. I don't know why I get those two mixed up sometimes. The Virgin games.
Right, he gets his Virgin mixed up often.
World.
Yeah. Definitely get married. So happens when you get married.
The first real company that I worked at, and there I worked on Monopoly Deluxe for DOS with Tommy Tallarico and with Mike Dietz. That was where we met. and where I met Brandon Humphreys, my future business partner. And I did some of the work on the technology that was used in the Aladdin games, the Digicel process. And then I worked on the Demolition Man game for 3DO.
Yeah.
It was one of the first games that had, or it was the first game that had special additional footage shot for the game, of the movie actors, of Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. We did special shoots to get footage for the games. That was the first time that ever happened. In fact, we had an interview on Entertainment Tonight on TV. I was on TV because of that. They were interested in that. And they came down to the studio and did some filming and asking us questions. So I appeared for a few seconds answering a question on TV. That was fun.
You sillywood.
Yeah.
Nice.
And what was really fun is going to the shoot and meeting Sylvester Stallone. I missed the Wesley Snipes day, but Sylvester Stallone was really cool. And Tommy was there, and he was having fun teasing Sylvester Stallone and challenged him to a boxing match right there.
I would love to see that.
Of course he did.
And they were, kind of shadow boxing each other.
Did.
A lot of fun. But yeah, I eventually, when I left Virgin, I left to start my own company with the team that I had worked on Demolition Man with. But that wasn't Big Grub. That was a different company that we started working with Universal Studios and Mark Cerny. And we started a company to work on a game for the next generation 3DO, which was in development, and working on prototype hardware initially. And that ended up not coming out as a hardware platform. It didn't come out. So the Universal Studios wanted to continue working with us, but wanted us to come in-house on the campus, Universal Studios, and we didn't want to do that. So we amicably parted ways, and then Brandon and I and one of the other guys formed a new company, Big Grub. So that's how that went.
Some of those projects that don't come out. I heard you worked on a port of Mario Brothers back. Don't want to age you. This was when you were like maybe 4, so you were pretty young, and it was never published. And some of the guys at Virgin actually were playing it like a pirated version. You made it, and you never like got to publish it, but they knew your work.
Right. That's exactly right. The first professional game I worked on was a port of Centipede from the Atari 800 to the Commodore 64. And this was with my friend Greg Tavares. So when I was in junior high and high school, I had a group of friends, me and Greg Tavares, Greg Marquez, Andy Brown, Ron Nakata. And we were all into Dungeons and Dragons and eventually playing video games and trying to make video games. And right out of high school, the summer after high school, we got hired to do this port. Atari Soft was porting a bunch of their games from the Atari to the Commodore 64. And so we were subcontracted by a company called Designer Software, who had the actual jobs from Atari Soft. And we ported Centipede that summer. And then we started, that was like a 6-week job, something like that. And then we started on Mario Brothers. So for Centipede, we had the code for the Atari 800, so it was really more of a port and a redo of the graphics for the Commodore 64. But for Mario Brothers, they wanted us to just recreate the game. Just here's the arcade machine. Go look at the arcade machine and make the game. Fortunately, we were Mario Brothers addicts and knew the game backwards and forwards and all the levels. And but I went there and spent days sketching all the art pieces. I was afraid that the guy was going to kick me out of the arcade because I was not spending money there. I was just watching the attract mode over and over so I could see the different frames of animation that they would stop on as they're jumping and running. Wow. And I did all the art. So I started out as an artist in this business. I did the artwork for Centipede. I did all the artwork for Mario Brothers, and I started doing some coding on Mario Brothers, but I was a little bit behind my friend Greg Tavares in terms of programming. He self-taught himself. He's just a genius, and he was programming on the Atari 800. And I started to learn in high school when we had programming classes, and little by little that sort of took over, and I left my art roots behind. Mostly, I still do things here and there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, when I had been, when I was looking up, I started looking you up more and more and more as I saw you from an Exile and stuff like that. But I did notice there was some connection to Shiny, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When Wild 9 was one,
right?
Wild 9 was, and Wild 9, I loved that game. That game was really unique. I remember it was one of the few PlayStation games that I had when I first got my PS2 because I was a Sega guy. So, it hurt me to move over to PlayStation afterwards. But because the PS2 was kind of backward compatible with the PS1, I went back and played a bunch of games that I had never played before. And Wild 9 was one of them because I loved Interplay. Interplay was one of my favorite companies back then.
Yeah.
So
Wild 9 was a fun game to work on. And as I mentioned previously, we had a company called Big Grub and we were doing our own original games, but then we got to the end of a contract, and that was my problem as a business guy trying to run my own business and also be in the development, was I wouldn't spend enough time doing business development for the next contract, and so we would have gaps and not pay ourselves while we paid our employees with the profits we made from the previous gig. But we ended up talking to David Perry, and he needed some help finishing Wild Nines, and we went over there and helped them finish that game. And like I said, it was a lot of fun to work on. And we ended up also working on Stunt Copter, which was kind of in development towards the end in parallel. And I ended up taking over that project for them and finishing that. And we also did some work with Interplay on their baseball game. I wasn't involved in that. We helped a little bit out on Messiah. So we were kind of doing that kind of firefighting work. And then I did get some more contracts for Big Rub, and we ended up pulling away from that and doing some originals on the PS1.
Nice. Spec Ops
and Zaboomafoo. That was one of my favorite games because my kids were totally into Zaboomafoo. Do you guys know who Zaboomafoo is?
Oh, I remember that.
No.
My kids sort of kind of.
Yeah, the Crap Brothers, these two guys that made a kids show about animals, and there was this lemur that was one of the characters that they talked to, and he becomes like a puppet. He's like a real lemur, but he becomes a puppet in the show. And they go on adventures and learn about animals. And so we made a game for PS1 based on that series, and my kids were in love with that program, so it was fun having them test the game out when they were little kids. And
cool. Narchi the Anteater.
Toothbrush the elephant and all.
Toothbrush the elephant.
Right.
It was Phoebe. I remember all those.
Yeah.
I'm so lost right now.
Sorry, man. You brought on. See, you keep bringing on
Zoomafoo. That's just to play on it.
What was that?
I'd heard of Zoomafoo.
Zaboomafoo.
I'm so confused.
ZOBO.
It was a kind of a. It was on PBS. It was on PBS,
and it was for young kids, a young kids show.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was one of the funny things is that when the game came out, it kind of got panned as low ratings, saying it was just kind of boring and repetitive, and these are by gamers that are rating this game made for little kids, right? And that was our intention, to make it simple, and it was sort of a little bit repetitive, and you couldn't really fail too badly. Like each level you're going around collecting fruits to fill up their little fruit machine at the clubhouse. And if you touched an animal, you would lose a fruit, but it would just reappear where you had first picked it up, so you could go back and get it, and eventually you could finish the level. So they were panned as too easy and too repetitive. But actually, years later, I saw a review. My partner Brandon sent me this review he saw on Amazon of the game, where a dad was saying how much his child loved that game and loved playing it, and loved pressing the button to make the character say "Zaboomafoo" and spin around, and that was sort of redemption for me. That yes, we made a game that was great for our target audience.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
awesome.
That sounds awfully familiar.
Yeah, that's what to say.
So. All right, I've geeked out on your past enough. I could spend another hour talking about the fun stuff you did, but
so you've known Tommy. So you obviously had a relationship with Tommy prior to the Intellivision. How did that conversation go, and kind of what made you want to sort of come on board and join the Amico team?
Yes, I've known Tommy since I said like the early '90s from Virgin. And throughout the years, we've been friends and stayed in contact and worked together. Like he did a lot of the sound and music for games that I did at my own companies and later in Exile. So I've always been in touch and continually working with Tommy over the years. So when I, on Facebook, he's my Facebook friend, I would see his posts. And so when he started hinting at this big new thing that he was going to do, he played this little game on Facebook where he was dropping hints and people were trying to guess what's this big new thing that Tommy's going to do. And I was there, trying to guess and trying to figure it out. And then it finally came out that he's going to bring back Intellivision and make a new console called the Amico. And the day he posted that, the big reveal, I didn't actually call Tommy, strangely enough. I called Bill. Bill was the technical director at the time, or the VP of technology, and I knew him as well from the industry, and he did some work with NXL, some of our mobile games. And I said, "Hey, Bill, I want to work on this project, and when you're ready to hire, give me a call." So, and I was the first person to contact him, and I sent him my resume and all that, and then I waited a couple of years till they were actually ready to hire.
Wow.
But yeah, I was so sold on the concept of making a family-friendly console that brings people to play together, multiplayer couch co-op. Everything about it just spoke to me, and I was all in. And
so when did you start within television? How long have you been there with those guys?
So it was let's see, is it end of 2018?
Oh, okay.
Was it? Yeah, I think so, because 2019 was the first E3, wasn't that correct?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, it would have been 2019. Yeah, it's 2018. Yeah, it had to have
2018 was Portland Retro. 2019 was CES, and I think behind the scenes at E3.
So it was December of 2018 when I started, and then E3 was June of 2019, and it was a good thing I started at that time because it was a lot of work to prepare for E3 and to do all the work for the mobile controller, which started out as just a project to sort of prototype the concept of what would be the physical controller, and as something to kind of like show people this is what it's going to be like, maybe show investors. And there was an idea that there would also be a mobile controller, but this wasn't necessarily going to be it. This was just going to sort of be to show what it would look like. But it actually has evolved into the mobile controller, and that's what we use for development for the developers that were working on games for us for E3, because we didn't have the hardware quite ready yet. It was in development, but it wasn't ready to send out to developers. So they developed all the E3 demos using the mobile controller that I wrote, and then much later we're able to ship out hardware controllers. So that was a lot of fun, and the first E3 was a pretty big success as far as our goals to show the console and the games that we had in development and the concept of the mobile controller and how it worked with the touchscreen and all that. So it was a big success for us.
Oh,
very cool.
Awesome.
Mick, I'm gonna let you kind of pretty much drive the show from here on out. I mean,
okay.
You kind of you and Mike can pretty much start asking the hard questions. Unless Cyrus has anything, because we know Cyrus has some real questions.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just fill in questions until Cyrus comes in with like the real stuff,
right?
Important things.
If I burp really, really loud, I'm about to start. That's my
okay. That's fair. That's
good. All right.
Okay.
All right. You ready, John? The timer is ticking.
I'm ready.
All right. We have to get that music, that game show music.
The Jeopardy music?
No, the weakest link music. That's always a good one. Or the minute to win it music. That's always good.
Manpack, we will definitely get
Manpack,
to that.
we're gonna get to that. That's
don't worry.
Our list of questions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is a good question, Ryan. Ryan wants to know if your mustache gets a separate paycheck.
Yeah.
No, it's rolled into the one check.
So there's a little line, right? Yeah,
it's a line
item.
Wasn't there like a serious rumor about the mustache being insured or something? Wasn't there like somebody?
Oh my god!
Like Lloyd's of London.
Somebody said something like for real.
Well, that would be who would insure it, but yeah.
That was asked on the live stream with Nick. They asked that question. Someone asked.
That was my question.
Yeah. Oh, is that your question?
Is it true?
It wasn't a dream, Cyrus. It wasn't a dream.
You guys know that if you go to Moby Games and you look up John, there's a picture from 2003.
Oh, no mustache.
Without the mustache.
Hold on a second.
No mustache.
No, I don't believe
no
it.
mustache, no beard.
I don't.
Moby Games, M-O-B-Y.
I'll put it in the chat.
I think John was born with that mustache.
No, I was clean shaven for a long time.
I've seen some interviews. You were.
I mean, in college, I had I tried to grow a mustache and it's kind of feeble.
Fake
and
news.
so then I was clean shaven for decades, and then one year
Oh my
for
goodness,
Halloween,
there it is. Hold on
for
a second.
Halloween, I decided to just grow just my facial hair to be a pirate, and I didn't expect to be able to grow a curly mustache. But when you get older, your hair starts to grow more, I guess.
Look at that.
There it is.
Yeah.
What?
That was at In-Exile Christmas party. That's what that picture's from.
Everything is a lie. It's all a lie.
So I mean, what
Former elf, he's Santa now.
Yeah, I mean, what's the? I mean, really, what's the story other than just? So you wanted to be a pirate.
Yes.
You wanted to be a pirate, and then just said, you know what, this looks badass. I'm keeping it.
That's pretty much what happened. It was growing out, and I noticed that I could actually start to curl, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. So after Halloween was over, I decided every time I looked in the mirror, I would just laugh. It just amused me so much. So I thought, I'm going to keep this. It's just making me happier.
How much work did you have to get it? Now does it stay on the turn like that on its own? Because it looks like you might have to put some effort into that curl, or is it pretty much a natural curl?
Can you see that picture?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh yes.
It's my pirate costume.
It's like a stand-in for Johnny Depp.
Outstanding.
Right.
Oh my goodness, that's outstanding. That is outstanding.
So yeah, I kept it from there. No, it doesn't. It just kind of naturally curls. It's naturally curly. It'll just be kind of frizzy if I don't put product in it. It'll be more frizzy on the ends. So yeah, it's not too much trouble.
The hard question.
I do have to trim it up every now and then.
Like I said, I'm totally superfluous to the stream. It's okay.
Nick, put your pinky up, Nick. All right, man, have at it.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you wanted to start or you wanted me to start. I figured we kind of split these up a little bit.
Go ahead, man.
Now we kind of organized this a little bit on like Sunday. I know you've kind of seen it because we shot some of these over to you. Basically, we're going to kind of just try to go into a breakdown of the system and various different components and things like that, and basically more technical things that you would be able to answer more appropriately than anybody else we've gotten on the show, including Tommy, who's no slouch at this himself. So the first thing that we had is like on Friday's video, you guys were talking pretty seriously about the FCC radiation testing and that was complete. What exactly does that mean? What is the radiation testing? And is that actually the hardest test to pass, or are there other tests that are comparable?
Yes, according to the electrical engineers, it is the hardest test to pass. This is not my area really, but I can tell you what I've heard from them. And what that test is when you turn on every part of the machine and you're running the lights and running the communications with the controllers and everything is on, it has to stay below a certain level of radio waves that are going out into the atmosphere and just staying in its channels and all that, and staying in its lane basically, so it doesn't interfere with other products in the home. So there's certain limitations you have to abide by, and so that might require doing some redesign or reworking of the board if something is making too much noise and whatnot, and adjustments like that. So that's why it's kind of the hard part, because the fixes are hard if there's something not quite working right. So that was a big deal to pass that emissions radiation test, and the rest of the tests are much easier, and it's just more of a formality to kind of get to do them and then get our final approval. But there was a lot of high-fiving around the office when that test passed. So
yeah, I could absolutely see that. What'd you have, Rob?
That's the critical component of SCC testing. I mean, that's why you have the testing, is that interference. I mean, that's what sunk or delayed so many consoles in the 70s and early 80s, so much so that I think like Texas Instruments knew a senator and they wanted to get into PCs, so they refined that whole process to make it a little more passable. You don't have to be as stringent with those standards, but it's still very difficult to make sure that you're not, emitting so much, radio signals. So if you're passing that, you've passed the biggest hurdle.
Yeah. Now, are there any other FCC tests that you guys have left to pass, or have you pretty much sailed through the rest of those and you're done?
I don't think we have final everything done, but it's going on right now. We should have our final certificates pretty soon.
Okay.
Again, that's not my area. I don't really keep track of that. I kind of hear updates every now and then when we have company meetings. But yeah, it's not my focus.
Fair enough.
Tommy said something to me months ago. He said, and this was I can't remember if we were talking about this on show or in private, but he said the least of their concern was the, not least of their concern was the testing, but it didn't seem like it was something that was going to be a big hurdle. Is that something that you would kind of agree with, John? You guys aren't really too worried about that? Like that's not going to be something that's going to be much of a holdback for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. It's a process that you have to get through, but there's never any like fear or concern that we wouldn't get through it. You just have to do the testing and adjust if there's anything that's out of line, and then move. You just keep moving forward through the process. So eventually it gets done. It might take a little bit longer than you hope or something, but it's not going to be a showstopper. No concern about that.
Right.
Good.
Cool.
Good.
So now we've gotten those questions out of the way. Let's go ahead and go into the controller, because I think you've got a decent amount of involvement in the controller and how it functions, correct?
Yes, and a lot more from the design perspective, because when I first started, there was the concept of the controller and having a touchscreen, but what was going to show up there and how it was going to work and how the menus would work, how it would work in conjunction with the TV, a lot of that was not really decided yet. There was just, so I did a lot of that design work for what should show up in the controller, how the menus work, and all of that has become designed for the hardware version of the controller. The mobile controller was like all the design work, and so the hardware controller has now been kind of replicating all that behavior that is working on the mobile controller. So I'm involved, in that way, and helping them know what to do. I'm writing documents that describes how it should behave, and writing documents about all the communication, because I designed and implemented all the communication codes between the console and the mobile controller. So all that is established. So I documented all that for them so they could get the same behavior going. So I'm involved in that way, but I'm not actually involved in programming on the hardware controller. That's Guido Henkel and Greg Marquez.
Yes.
And if you were paying attention earlier, you might have, I don't know if this was before the stream started, but I mentioned Greg Marquez was one of my high school friends. That was, way back in junior high and high school. He was one of the 5 guys that were all into computers and Dungeons and Dragons and whatnot. And of those 5 people, 4 of us went into the game industry, and Greg is one of them. And he had his own career path, and I pulled him into Intellivision. So he's working on the film. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so that's it. We do have quite a few questions on the controller. It was one of the things we focused on, that and the motion controls and all that quite a bit. Mostly because for me, it's one of the big selling points of the console, and one of the most interesting facets of this console is this kind of new controller design that it's got homages to the original television controller, but nobody's really seen anything quite like it, right?
Right.
So one of the things that kind of got brought up that we kind of had a question on that kind of came up out of the blue a little bit was, have you guys actually kind of like finalized the batteries that you're going to be using in the controller, and are you happy with what you're getting from the manufacturer as a result of that finalization?
I believe it is finalized, and this is another area, unfortunately, that's not my area of focus or expertise. This is the electrical engineers that deal with that, and they, went through different batteries, I know, and they went through the process of testing these batteries with these machines that charge and uncharge them to test battery life. And I remember in the early days them talking to different vendors and trying different ones out. But we're settled on all that now, and the batteries we have now, they work well, and they last 4 to 6 hours, which is plenty for the type of gameplay that we envision people are going to engage with the Amico. And if they should run low on battery or run out, then we have the ability to plug in a USB-C, and have it wired to power it while you're playing. If you want to just keep playing, you can plug it into an outlet with an adapter, just like you would charge your Android phone.
Right. No, we noticed that when we were at the event as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Did you have some?
I just had a follow-up question. And Nick, I don't know if this is in one of your lineups of questions, but I'm just going to ask it. There's been some questions amongst a lot of people as far as connectivity issues. Has there been any type of connectivity issues that you guys are trying to work on or finalize or get worked out, or is that just pretty much hearsay at this point? I mean, I didn't really experience anything at Crayola, but have you guys experienced anything on your end with that?
During development, the early days of development, and sometimes into the later, more recent times, there are always bugs that can come up that cause a disconnect, because if on the hand controller, the firmware, for example, if there's a bug that causes it to crash, then that's going to reset the controller, and then that's going to reset the connection, and it'll have to reconnect. So that's really the only kind of trouble that happens. I mean, establishing a connection works great and it'll maintain the connection, but if there's a bug, which there inevitably are as you're developing firmware or software, then any crash in the software or firmware forces it to have to reconnect. So there were issues like that more in the older days, but not so much recently.
So it's so essentially what I hear is it's pretty typical amongst development. So we may have seen it in the past,
sure,
but because I mean, you said it comes up in development, it happens, bugs, but this isn't something that's going to be an issue. Say you need to launch in October, like, yes, this is something, if they do exist, this isn't an issue. We can get it pretty much ironed out by launch day. We're not worried about it, type of thing.
Exactly. The controller has been very stable, in the past couple of months, and we're working on other issues, like more of, like I mentioned, the details of making it do all the behaviors that the mobile controller does, and maybe little bugs here and there with the display system or whatever.
Can I ask you about that? The mobile controller versus the Amico controller. We haven't really had a chance to play games with that mobile control, the mobile version of the controller with the console. What are the differences like in how that's implemented? Like, and are you noticing any issues with one that you haven't seen with the other, so to speak?
Well, the biggest difference is you just don't have the tactile feedback on the mobile controller that you do with the Amico controller, because you have physical buttons and a physical disc. The disc is so great on the Amico controller, to the touch and feel of it and the way it moves. And on the mobile controller, you're just brushing your thumb on a flat screen. You don't even know if it's on the disc or if you stray off of it. That's the worst part about it, unless you look down, right? So that's the biggest difference. But otherwise, it's a different set of code that's been made to do the same thing, but they could have different ways they're implemented and different bugs that crop up on one or the other. But if they are running the same system, though, for the touchscreen display and all the assets that display on the touchscreen, it's the exact same code running on both. It's just ported to different platforms and runs as a DLL on the mobile controller.
Can you clarify one thing regarding the mobile controller? Because I know there's been a question about this raised. The disc controller for the real Amico controller versus the simulated disc on the mobile, how do they operate differently? What is the difference between how they work?
Well, the mobile controller, you just have to touch it for one to get a press, whereas if on the Amico controller, you have to actually, press down. Just touching it and spinning it around, it moves, it rotates, but you have to kind of press down for the contacts to, register a press. And so it's more mobile controller, you just have to touch. And we don't have the same kind of pressure sensitivity, but we do pass along any pressure data that the phone provides. So some different phones do provide pressure on the touch data that you pick up. So we pass that along, but some older phones don't have that, so you wouldn't get that pressure data from the mobile controller. And I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, you can touch it anywhere on the disc and get a direction, whereas you kind of have to hit it towards the edges on the Amico controller to get
if it's not transmitting that pressure data, if it's not collecting that data because it's a phone that just can't do that, how is that? Is that a problem for games? Like, how is that being compensated for, or is that even necessary to worry about? Like, what?
So far, it hasn't been necessary. I think if a game heavily relied on that, one thing that they could do for the mobile controller is just use distance instead of pressure. So you have, because it detects your touch anywhere on that disc, you could have it. The more you go out to the right after touching the disc, that could equal more pressure or run faster if that's what they're using pressure for, sort of thing like that. And I actually developed I guess you'd call it a technology to give better feedback for the mobile controller, because you're looking at the TV, right? You're not really looking down here, so you have that issue of you don't know where your thumb is You don't know, am I near the center or near the edge? And so I developed this concept of a feedback on the screen on your character or whatever it is that you're manipulating, of a little tag or thumbprint that shows relative to your character where you are on the disc. So you get that feedback, and then you can know, oh yeah, I'm straying off, or I'm up, or I'm right, or I'm left, because you see that little thumbprint or icon move around your character, and that's pretty effective. But it's something that's not needed on the Amico controller, because you can feel where you are.
You can feel it, yeah.
Right.
Now, is the mobile controller is that a Bluetooth connection to the console?
Mobile controller is Bluetooth. Mobile controller is Wi-Fi. The Amico controller is Bluetooth.
Have you found any differences in I mean, is there any latency coming out of the Wi-Fi connection when you connect no,
not really. It's plenty fast. Yeah, no real differences. In the end, it's just communication, and the protocol underneath at some layer treats them all both the same. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
are the batteries going to be replaceable? Somebody had asked, and just as I'm sure it's a quick yes or no answer for the batteries on the Amico controller. Is that something that can be replaced if they go bad, or is it pretty much get a new controller at that point?
They could be replaced if someone has some technical skill and wants to open it up and avoid the warranty, but it's not designed to be replaced. It's not like we made like a little thing that you can just open the hatch and stick a new battery in there.
So it's
kind of like your phone. You can replace the battery on your phone, right? But I wouldn't do that myself. I would take it somewhere and.
Yeah, this is a good question. But most phones have gyroscopes, though, don't they? What if your phone doesn't have a gyroscope? I guess it wouldn't work, right?
Some things wouldn't work, if they require the gyroscope. Yeah. But I think, I mean. Yeah, so
I'm trying to think what phone
have
doesn't
accelerometers.
have a
I don't know if some might not have a gyroscope, so that would
a jitterbug.
Yeah.
So it might not be compatible for certain games, or
So kind of on the back,
just buy an Amico controller. Trust me, they're awesome.
Yeah. To piggyback then on Ted's question, and you may not know this, and if we can get the answer from somebody, that'd be great. Do you happen to know what the median shelf life of the battery is supposed to be? How long before they wear out? As all batteries do.
I don't know that question. Sorry, the answer to that question. That would be one for Mike Costco or Jeff.
All right, I'll go after that one.
Somebody asked, and this is a really good question. We know that you can use the controller with the USB-C plugged in to power it if it's starting to go out, But can you use the USB-C to use the controller like a wired controller, to where it won't use the Bluetooth connection, where it would actually be like a wired controller?
The port on the controller for charging is purely a charging port. There's no, it's not a data port, so we wouldn't be able to use it for communication. Okay. No.
So that does the other side to that is, does the Amico have the capability of supporting a wired controller of some kind?
Not really, because there's not really there's only one USB data port on it on the back. I mean, I suppose if you had some sort of splitter or something, conceivably, but because the controller doesn't have a data port, it's like you couldn't connect to it, even if maybe a different controller that did have data port is what you're saying.
Right,
yes,
because
technically that would be possible.
It would be possible, because the question had been brought up in the past, like, would it be possible later on to have support for different types of controllers if there are people that they really prefer a different controller, or developers decide they'd like to give that option. That's kind of what I was getting at, with that. So you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not they implement a wired connection or a Bluetooth connection, it could go either way, I suppose. But they would still have to implement all the functions. Like, it would have to have a touchscreen, because a lot of the games just rely on that, expecting it to be there.
Yeah.
Okay. So going into like wired controllers and other types of controllers, have you guys approached any third parties, or have any third parties entertained making controllers for the console, or you guys even open to that as a prospect?
We've not approached anyone, and no one's approached us as far as I know. I don't know all of what goes on in the business world. That would be a good Phil Adam question. He was on the stream, a couple of
Yeah, I
years
think we
Phil,
had
get back
that
on here,
question
Phil.
around that time.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's still in the chat. He might
He's
be
in
able
the
to
chat.
Oh yeah, there
Phil,
you go.
answer that question, Phil.
He would know. if
Phil's out
anyone
hydrating.
approached us about that
Phil's
kind of
not
thing.
hydrating.
But as far as I know, no, we haven't been approached and haven't looked for
Would
that.
you if somebody did and met the Intellivision standards, would you officially license with them?
I don't see why not. I mean, that wouldn't be my decision, but I don't see why not.
What kind of challenges would that bring up for a third party making a controller?
Really, it's just making sure they implement the protocol correctly that we've developed. It's a proprietary protocol that we use for the communication between the console and the controller. So they would have to meet that and then keep pace if we make any changes in firmware updates.
So that brings up kind of another question, because you're talking about the proprietary interface and all that. Exactly kind of how does that work? Because you've got kind of like a mix of like HTML and JavaScript that works as communication between the console and the controller, right?
Yes.
Like, what exactly is that capable of? Like, how fast can you load things? What kind of assets? I mean, what are some of the pros and cons of the touchscreen as far as what you can actually do with it?
Well, there's sort of two types of communication, or two phases of communication that happen. When a game is first launched, there are controller assets which download to the controller. These would be your images, like your PNG images, and your compiled HTML files, your audio files if you have any, your localization files. Those all get downloaded to the controller, and then they're stored in the controller memory, ready for display on the touchscreen, or playing through the speaker if it's audio. And once those are there, then you can enter the game. And while the game is running, the console is sending, like, network events, we call them, sending events back and forth between the controller and the console. And some of those events are commands to tell the controller to do things like display this specific HTML file on the touchscreen. And once that's displayed, then it can say change this property of that HTML file to change some text, or to make an animation happen. And so you can, even though the HTML files are compiled offline and they're static in that sense, once they get down to the controller, they can have all these changeable properties you can manipulate at runtime. So,
okay.
Yeah. And the input communication is sort of on its own. It's kind of a third way of communicating. So you've got the initial download, and then you've got the events going back and forth, and then you have the controller input communication, which is kind of on its own channel and is happening at a faster rate. So that would be your button presses and your disk input and your touch screen position. If you're looking for that data, your accelerometer and gyroscope data is coming through fast on a separate channel.
Can I ask you a question, John?
Yeah.
What if you know I don't know if you even know this, but have you been able to measure in any way what the actual Bluetooth lag is between the controller and the console itself? Like, do you know, like in a general way or a specific way, even, like, what kind of communication limitation there is there, or any however you want to talk about that, really?
Yeah, so in the early days of development, when we're first getting Bluetooth working, we had these plans of measuring the latency, because the very first pass of it, there did seem to be some little bit of slowness there. But you don't know, is it in the code that's processing it, or is it in the Bluetooth stack that's slow? Where is the bottleneck? And so there was some debugging going on about that, and we had these plans and ideas for how to measure latency using a camera and watching the button presses and these different ways to actually get real data on that. But as we found the problems, like maybe it was something on the console, the way it was handling the input queue or whatever, and things just got better to where you couldn't really tell, and you just play and it doesn't feel like there's any lag. We didn't have to go to that level of detail of fine-tune measuring what the actual latency is. It just felt great. So, move on to the next task, right?
Right.
So, what version of Bluetooth are you running?
I'm actually not sure. That would be a question for Gabe, who's the firmware engineer.
Why is Gabe not in the chat? Come on, we
I
got
thought it-
Phil
I thought
Adams.
it
we
was-
got
Yeah, I know.
Dan in
Come
the
on.
chat.
We got everybody else.
I thought it
I'm
was
sure
listed
Tommy's
as
in
like
there lurking.
I thought it was listed as like 2.4s, 2.5 on the specs or
What's that,
something
Gabe?
like that. It's been a while.
Yeah, it just says wireless / Bluetooth. I was wondering if it was like if you guys had gone to Bluetooth 5 or.
He's in the office. Someone's
I
probably
think
yelling
Gabe
at
is still here, and I
answer.
think he shouted an answer to me, but I didn't hear
Yeah.
it.
Everybody be quiet.
4.0?
4.0. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, it's 4.2. Bluetooth
4.2.
4.2.
Okay.
Yeah,
4.2. Okay.
there you go.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
The
Gabe.
bluest of coots. Teeth.
So Gabe is probably kind of watching the stream because he heard that at least.
It sounds like he's watching it, yeah. Or he can actually hear every word I say through the walls here. So
Oh.
when I say I don't know
okay.
what Bluetooth level we're at, he probably heard that, and whether he's watching the stream or not, he will answer.
You seem, by the
when we
way,
do that.
you seem to have a much better connection in your office than Tommy does in his. So
Yeah, so
I will,
talk
we'll
about
say
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John's got the good internet connection in his office.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of fitting. He's probably doing more of the work across that anyway.
Tommy was probably on the Wi-Fi, and I'm directly connected to Ethernet.
Yes,
Good
that's
man.
what it is.
Good man. See,
That's what it is.
That's what. That's
See, I'm not a tech guy. I actually had it's an amazing. Thankfully, this stream happened tonight because of the two guys above me, Geeks
Yeah.
of Cash and Mike, because I was having some serious. I went off in my Discord. I was going crazy, swearing. My wife hears me swearing. My kids are hearing me swearing. I'm like just mad at my computer, and Mike and Nick helped calm me down and get it fixed. so
And
this could
walking
happen
through
again.
some tech support.
Can I ask a question real quick about what we just were talking about? What is the Wi-Fi like on the Amico? What is that connection like? Like, what kind of standard is implemented, and what are your general what have your results been as far as internet and also since the phone uses that, like what have your results been with that sort of thing?
Well, it's using UDP. I don't know if you're familiar with the different protocols or TCP/IP, and there's UDP. Games tend to use UDP because it's a faster protocol, but it's not a reliable connection. But if you're just sending like inputs and you don't care about the older input, you just care about the most recent input, then that's the way you want to go, and just for speed purposes. So it's a standard, it's nothing special about it. It's just UDP, and we open up a socket and communicate with the mobile controller that way. The challenge is then you have certain things like these network events I talked about, where I'm sending a command to the controller to display a certain screen. That has to get there. We can't accidentally drop that. So I had to implement a layer on top of the UDP to guarantee that those messages would get there, and sort of a handshaking. And I didn't want to implement like TCP/IP on at the same time or on top of the.
What are
UDP,
you
so-
implementing then? Because TCP/IP is the main handshake protocol, with
Yeah.
UDP being basically used for video and streaming. Because if you miss a frame or two, whatever, just continue on with your video. It's more of an interruption to do the handshake. So I understand where you're going with that, but what exactly did you implement then?
It's just a simple handshaking protocol over UDP. Like, it sends a message and it waits for a reply that says, I got that message. And if it doesn't get it, it sends it again on a sort of a schedule.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it doesn't send the next event until the one has been acknowledged, and it goes on to there's a queue of events. And so it's pretty.
So it's like a
simple.
low-level TCP protocol then.
Kind of, yeah.
Right.
So that happens over Bluetooth with the controller, or
No, that's Wi-Fi.
That's the Wi-Fi that you were asking about. The Bluetooth doesn't use that.
I was just wondering because I thought the controllers were communicating with Bluetooth.
I'm sorry, it's the mobile controller that does the Wi-Fi that I've been talking about.
Okay.
All right.
Because
Can you not make a Bluetooth connection with the phone? Is that not possible? I mean, it should recognize it as it should have a Bluetooth device, right?
It should be possible, but we didn't go that route. And I'm trying to think about the reasons why. Well, we did want to have them on separate channels so that they wouldn't interfere with each other, so that we would have those two different approaches. And we could have up to four Amico controllers and add additional. Well, actually, I do remember the reason why now that I think about it. You can only have so many connections on Bluetooth, so we wouldn't be able to have 8 controllers if it was all Bluetooth.
Oh, so you wanted
That was
8 Amico controllers, so you went with
right.
Okay,
So we
Wi-Fi
kinda
4. Okay,
we split
okay.
it up. So
I wasn't aware of that limitation on Bluetooth.
That's an interesting
All
point.
right.
So is it 4 controllers? The limitation, regular controllers, is the limit for the Amico?
Well, we've decided that that's what we wanted to limit it to. Like the Bluetooth, it has like these IDs, and there's only 8 IDs. So like, then the server console is one of them. So you could have up to 7 theoretically. But we also didn't want to like burden the channel too much. So we thought 4 is a good measure. And actually, I think currently you can connect more than 4 because we haven't enforced that limit yet.
Right.
But that's something we planned to do.
Okay.
Okay.
So right
kinda
now,
keep
so for example, so just a quick question. I have 5 people in my house. So on launch day, will all 5 of us be able to have a controller, or will one of us have to be using a cell phone if we want to play, say, a game like Evil Knievel? Could we all be using, I don't know if that's 8 players, but
under the current plan, you would be limited to 4 Amico controllers, so you'd have to have 1 cell phone.
okay. That's good to know.
So
I think
you say current plan, so that's something that you can upgrade at a later time, because you're right. The Bluetooth 4.2 spec does allow for 7 connections.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something you can, for a lack of a better word, unlock later, using a Sony word there?
I think the reasons for limiting it are more of performance, like not having too many Bluetooth controllers trying to communicate in that Bluetooth band. There might start to be lag or something like that. But I think we decided that 4 works well, and we didn't want to like push that limit.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Microsoft limits how many controllers it wants on Bluetooth on Bluetooth as well.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Well, they do. They don't even use Bluetooth. They use Wi-Fi. They use their own proprietary Wi-Fi. So Sony uses Bluetooth.
Yeah.
So
Now, kind of sticking with the controller a little bit more, what was kind of the thought process between using like a touchscreen versus a touchpad or some other more, I guess, more common control scheme when you were going in with the Amico? What was kind of like the genesis that brought that to the forefront? What did you think you were going to get out of it? And have you managed to hit those goals or even exceed those goals?
Well, I think that the big impetus was to be able to have private information on your controller so that we could implement like board games and card games where you have your cards that are supposed to be secret, right? Or like Scrabble where you have your letters but you don't want other people to see them. That was a big part of it. And I think also kind of inheriting from the Intellivision concept before of having these additional like a array of buttons that you can access on the old controller. There's like the 3x3 numbers that you could hit as additional input in addition to this buttons on the side.
Yeah.
And the thinking, well, if we had a touch screen, we could actually show like different icons for those buttons as opposed to having like overlays over physical buttons like they did in the old days with the Intellivision controller. So it was kind of twofold. One was that concept of being able to have those additional buttons, but customize them because they would just be graphics on a touch screen, and then also being able to have private information displayed that would unlock the ability to do different kinds of games that you couldn't really do on other traditional consoles.
So the gameplay mechanic and the versatility that come with being able to mix it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So how quick? Oh, go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say,
go to the next question. If you got
okay,
go.
how quickly? I was going to ask one of the other ones that was part of the coding question. How quickly can you change that on the fly to adjust the different states in a game?
Oh, what's displayed on the touchscreen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's updating around 15 frames a second, so it's not super fast. The hardware that we went with was sufficient to meet the goals that I just mentioned, like being able to have private information and being able to have buttons that are responsive enough for physical, human input and feedback. And we didn't want to go any further than that because then you start to increase the cost of the hardware. So we had to strike that balance where we could keep the cost reasonable but achieve the goals that we wanted to in terms of user interface. But you can put animations on there in it, and if you do them well, then they look great. Like I think you guys played Rigid Force Redux Enhanced.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and they show some animations of the ship flying on the screen,
Played
and
great.
there's lines going
Mhm.
by, and it looks like it's going fast because they
Yeah.
had good artists and good animation, and you can do fun stuff like that.
Right.
I think Finnegan Fox was running on the screen. I
another
think
one.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Right, when you tap
Yeah.
the screen, it's the jump button. You actually see him jump, or he's jumping to show that this is the jump
Yeah.
button, and then that's where you hit
Right.
to make him jump on the TV.
So what can't this controller do from a standpoint of things that might be part of gameplay? You know, we talked about what it can do. What can't it do? Oh, that's an odd question, but
That is an odd question.
well,
Someone's asking like a mini
well, like,
games, for example,
you know,
like in the chat.
right.
They do mini games.
Oh,
on the
I see what you're
controller.
saying. Right. So that was not part of our goal with the controller. It was never to be able to play mini games on the controller itself. Although as a game developer at heart, you know, I'm always trying to make games on any device. When in the early days in high school, I was trying to make games on the terminal that was connected to the mainframe at far away at the district, and making like text-based games. So you know.
So
that I
you
was
did
thinking
Doom
about-
on the pregnancy test.
No. So you know, I was, of course, and Guido and I were thinking about, well, wouldn't it be cool to make some little games on it? And you could do some games on there technically if they don't require a high frame rate. Like you could, you know, do slider puzzle or tic-tac-toe, or you know, those sorts of games, or even a breakout type game. And it has,
Tic-tac-toe confirmed.
yeah, I mean, it has the ability, but like I said, your limitations are about 15 frames per second. But if you're moving small, that's with a lot of stuff moving. If you're moving small things on the screen, then you could probably get a little bit higher frame rate. But that was never really the goal, to make mini games on the controller. It's more of an interface to the game on the TV.
The chat's got some good stuff. It can't solve world hunger. It can't do your taxes.
I think part of the genesis of that question is when everybody kind of saw
can't
this
find you a
controller.
girlfriend. That's a good one.
Won't be your girlfriend.
One of the things that everybody's mind went to was,
I think
the
you can get a
Dreamcast
girlfriend
controller.
to come to your
with-
house and play games with you, though. With the Amico is the whole
Hey,
concept.
maybe it can get you a girlfriend.
It
She
might.
comes over, she likes the console, you're okay, maybe.
Kismet.
Amico and chill.
Oh, Nick, I'll hold it up while you
There's
ask.
your
While
quote.
you,
John,
There's a
you
quote.
just made the intro. What time are we at? An hour or two. Write
Hour
that down.
two.
I think part of that question
That
was
counts as a mustache.
so many of us have memories of the Dreamcast controller
How?
and being
Where's
able to
the
play
mustache
small
from?
memory things off
Right.
the VMUs
Nah,
and
you
stuff
just get a
like
shot.
that. And when we were kind of looking at this
Already
controller,
did one.
like, wow, wouldn't it be neat to have, like, say, an old school version of, say, Astro Smash or this, that, and the other on the controller, while you're on the go. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Right.
And I think it was actually you that mentioned that, Mike, when we were like working up these questions. So that I think that's part of what that kind of came up with, and knowing like what all the controller can do dynamically while you're in a game, like how far you guys can actually push the controller before you start running into any kind of issues, right? Now, with all this stuff kind of going on with the controller, all this stuff kind of has to affect the battery life of the controller, I would imagine, or the duration that the controller stays charged. Now, you may not be the person to answer this, but have you guys done any testing on some of the stuff that's more intensive with what you're doing on the screen with the lights and all that stuff? And how has that like negatively affected the controller's battery life, if any?
Well, I do know that there are certain functions that drain more battery life.
That was going to happen eventually.
And,
That's a good one.
and vibration, as we just experienced here in someone's throat, is one of the things that drains more. That drains more battery. The haptics will, use more battery because it's more of a physical motion. The gyroscope actually uses more battery. So one of the interfaces for game developers is you can tell the controller what kind of data you want out of it. If your game doesn't use gyroscope or doesn't use accelerometer, then we just we don't turn those on, so they're not using power. But yeah, so there are some things like the lights. The LEDs don't use much, but and we do encourage people to use the lights, so that's just part of the experience. So those are going to be on. But yeah, so some things will make the battery drain a little bit more quickly.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the haptic feedback on this, how is this comparative to like other more modern controllers? Like, have you used it and compared it to say like, I wouldn't say like maybe a PS5 controller, but maybe like say an Xbox 360 controller, an Xbox One controller, or even a PS3 or PS4?
It's more like a phone haptic vibration. Like in the console controllers that you mentioned, they have bigger motors in them, like that actually kind of spinning kind of weight vibration motors, so they get a big rumble. And what we have is I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's basically a device that kind of operates like a speaker where there's electricity that makes a diaphragm move. Like in a speaker, it makes the air move to make sound, so it's moving like a paper diaphragm.
Oh, that's how yours works. Okay.
But it moves a little weight back and forth to create the rumble, and it's tiny. It's a little tiny thing in there. So,
That's
but
interesting.
it creates a vibration. You can definitely feel it, and it makes a strong vibration. So it's just a different kind of vibration than what you would feel in the.
That's actually kind of cool. I don't think I've heard of that being done before. I've seen plenty of them like motors all the way back to the N64 with the rumble pack, because that used a motor too. But I've not seen one use a diaphragm before. That's kind of cool.
Can I ask something real quick? We're talking about the motors for that. We're talking about the screen, the lights. Have you guys considered allowing for the user to be able to go into like the settings and like dim down the brightness or turn down the vibration, stuff like that?
I think we actually had that as a question, but that's a good question.
Cyrus read the questions.
He must have, because we had that. We got that in there at some point.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I don't know if that was there
Nice
when you guys
segue.
were playing the games, but in the mobile controller, you can go into the menus and into preferences, and there are settings for changing the volumes and changing for sound and for changing the brightness, both on the console and on your controller. And you can go all the way down to 0 if you don't want any lights.
Wow. Okay. Man, all right. Man.
I think it's a little too advanced for the Zune. I'm not sure they're compatible.
Oh my god.
Licensing fees to Microsoft are negative.
He's one of the 10 people that remembers Zune.
I remember Zune. I
remember it. It doesn't.
You're
yeah,
also
right.
one of the 10. Yeah. There's mostly 10 right here. 6 and Panda. There's a couple more in the chat.
I never owned
like
one.
4
I
of
looked
them.
at it and went, no, thank you.
I'm not surprised, Rab.
Yeah, Mike, speaking of that, let's go ahead and go into the lights. Do you have some of those questions like right up in front of you right now? I know we had a bunch.
Yes, I do. So how are you guys using the lighting around the console and on the controller in the games that you use to enhance the gameplay experience? So we've seen it kind of a little bit in Moon Patrol, but how much development, thought process, and effort gets put into that?
Well, when we are designing the games, and Tommy is at the forefront of that effort of designing the games, but both Mike Dietz, our director, and myself are involved quite a bit, and especially in the feedback when builds come in and we give feedback. We're always thinking about those sorts of things and making suggestions of where they might use lighting on the controller or on the console for this and that. So I think developers aren't as used to it because it's a new thing, so they don't necessarily think of it right off the bat. But once we kind of give them some cues, they sort of pick up on it, and some of them run with it. I think Moon Patrol did some stuff with it, and the Rigid Force guys are pretty good with lights, what they're doing on the controller.
Ooh.
So
okay.
Yeah, I think once they turn their attention to it, it's pretty easy to implement and pretty easy to put in hooks in different parts of their game to do light effects that correspond to what's going on in the gameplay. So I think you'll see some fun stuff.
Now, random follow-up question I don't think we had written down. What kind of lighting protocols do you have set up? Because I think you've got some, I'm sure you got some prepackaged, right? As part of Unity or whatever, which I know is your primary development suite for the console. Can people custom make those to custom deal with the LEDs, or do they have to stick to what you guys have prepackaged? And what kind of flexibility does that have?
Yeah, it's completely flexible. There actually are no prepackaged lighting effects. We do have some prepackaged sort of vibration haptic effects that they can use, but they can also customize. But for the lighting, we have a protocol that they can create data to do interesting effects, like make chaser lights, around the console, or make different patterns that morph from one to the next, and sort of like that. It's just more of a little simple to use protocol that they can send commands at runtime to do different effects.
Yeah, so sort of like starter protocols, but pretty much whatever they want to code, they can go in and do on their own, right? Within the limitations of the LEDs themselves, I would imagine. Which is probably a pretty wide gamut of colors that you could do on those LEDs, right?
It's basically RGB. I think part of the challenge is just kind of getting the brightness that you want. Like what you see as an RGB color on the screen will look a little bit different as a LED light, and maybe it's brighter than what it shows up on the screen. So you just kind of adjust your levels based on what you actually see.
Right.
And and do your effects that way.
So we don't drive our other John crazy. We're going to detour back to the motion controls.
I've had this video queued up like for an hour.
Yes, you really
You guys are killing me. This technical shit. Listen. This technical organized shit is killing me. All right, I'm just sitting back. Nick's asking questions about like THC protocols. I'm like, I got this.
Enough with the acronyms. I got a mustache strong.
It's TCP, THP, not a protocol that I'm aware of. But you know, whatever.
My God! All right.
So I want to get into motion controls.
All right, we'll come back to the lights later.
You guys can go back to lights. Leave in the chat. Type 1 in the chat if you agree that lights are boring, and we want to talk about
lights are not boring.
All right, so we got a pretty cool office tour. By the way, not sure what Tommy. I'm guessing he used his phone for this, but his phone has a really good camera. We got some motion controls. We've wanted to see cornhole for a while now. We didn't get to play it at Crayola. There's the man with the mustache here. Can you guys hear this?
Ends up being pretty fun.
Yes.
Hold the camera for us here. We're gonna show people.
So, John, I gotta ask, what is that on the screen? Because there was some people that I feel like, for whatever reason necessary, we have to clear this up.
Game. Yeah.
That some people apparently thought this was the game and how far it is and how it looks. Can you explain to us what we're seeing on this screen right now?
Why are you even going into this? This is silly.
I know.
You are seeing. Well, actually, you're seeing my wife in the background. I just noticed.
Oh, nice. No one pay attention to the monitor next to it with the code.
Right. Proprietary code. You need to put a black square rectangle over that part. So one of the things we do is we actually work very closely with the developers, both in the design and even in their code, and helping them to optimize, and sometimes even getting in and doing some coding for them, or helping them, or doing some experiments on our own for control mechanics, and then saying, yeah, this works. Can you guys do it this way? And this is one example of that, where we just developed a little prototype for ourselves. This is not the cornhole game at all. This is just a test bed where we put together the basics that we would need to test out our motion control algorithms and test out interface elements that we want to have, and targeting mechanics that we want to implement. So we didn't want to just try to, what happens sometimes is you have an idea of how you think something's going to work, and you might tell the developer, okay, make it do this, and then a few days later they come back with something that's sort of like what you wanted but not really, or and so there's a big turnaround time if you try to experiment that way. So when we get into a mode where we're trying different ideas, we do it locally. We just implement a prototype and then work on it until we're happy with it. And we say, yeah, okay, this is what we want to see. And so that's what we did here for cornholes. We made this prototype quick and dirty so that we could analyze the data. And I have a programmer named Connor who's a math genius, and I hired him specifically to work on this type of problem, and who's working on this code and analyzing the motion data and figuring out how to get the data we need to do a cornhole game, like to get the velocity and get the slice or hook left to right and that sort of thing. And at this stage, we had decided that we wanted to break up that mechanic of throwing into having a targeting portion and then the actual throw itself. So we needed to do some experimentation with that. So that's what this is. It's a prototype just for the mechanic of throwing, and so that we could work out the math and the sort of the interface we wanted to see in the game. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah,
it made sense to me before.
Yeah.
So I just
Now,
way more attention than it deserved. I just wanted
yeah.
to
No, well,
clear that up.
wait. We have questions based around this, John. So
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
we do.
Well, we're still going on this. I just want to play,
Yeah,
play
so-
it as we go.
Call this programmer art. And
Go ahead.
programmer art.
It is.
this Amico controller.
So what
So what's
he's
he do-
doing here?
I want
Go
to
ahead,
see what he's
John.
doing here. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
you asked
well,
better
we
questions than me.
we were no. You I think you were going where Nick and I were kind of going with these questions is. Can you tell us, John, what a lot of what reworking is going on here, and how does that what does that mean for the game and for the player?
But
Okay, so originally for Cornhole, we had the concept of keeping it super simple, and this is one of the things that we always try to do with the game designs is keep them simple, because we're making simple games that people should be able to pick up and play easily. So it's one of the lenses through which we look at the games. To borrow from Jesse Shells, if you guys ever seen the Art of Game Design, he has this concept of lenses through which you look at your game design. And for us, one of them is simplicity, and one of them is the karma gaming. And so we wanted to keep it super simple. So the original idea was just all you would do is it'd be your turn, and you'd press a button, and you'd swing and throw, and you throw the bag out there. And it made some assumptions, like it made an assumption that you're aiming for the hole, and it made not an assumption, but an imposition that you're just always standing at the center at a certain place, right? So we were trying to get this information of the throw, which would include like the angle of the throw, the power of the throw, whether or not you're off, left, or right. There were several things we were trying to extract from that one motion, but we don't have like we had like the bar that gave it additional accurate
The infrared sensor.
Yeah, positioning information. So we didn't have that, and so it's harder to get accurate position information. You're sort of like dead reckoning, gathering up the acceleration data as it's going and trying to determine a velocity and trying to avoid the drift that happens in the gyroscope if you don't have a magnetometer and all that kind of stuff. So we're finding that with the mobile controller, the data, which does have a magnetometer, data was stable enough that we could get a pretty decent throw. Not great, but pretty good. But it was a little trickier on the Amico controller because we don't have the magnetometer. And I started thinking, well, maybe we're trying to get too much information out of this. Maybe we should break it up a little bit and have like a targeting mechanic so that we're trying to get less information, maybe just the power and give them the ability to choose the angle. And we ended up I was thinking along these lines, and we ended up talking to another developer who's doing a game for us who has a lot of experience with motion control games. They've done games on the Wii in the past. And so we met with them just to sort of pick their brains about this, and they confirmed everything I was thinking. They said, yeah, you want to, and some of the games they've done, you want to try to limit what you're getting out of the motion to like a single factor if possible, and do other mechanics in UI to complete the performance that the player is trying to do. So with that confirmation, we went ahead and designed this concept of having a targeting mechanic where you can move where you're aiming at. There's like on the touch screen, you can slide around and there's a target over there. It's hard to see, but it's on the board over there. You can actually see it on the lower left. There's like a top-down view of the board. It's like a different camera view, so you can see the target. So you can slide that target around so you can decide what part of the board you're aiming for. You can move your position left and right like you just did there. And then with the up and down of the controller, that's using motion control, you control the angle of the arc that you want to throw at. Do you want to have it low and coming in fast and hot so it would like knock other bags off the board? Or do you want it to just really land and stick somewhere so you would do a higher arc so it just comes down and doesn't slide much? So by doing that, we found immediately that it was more fun and interesting because you're adjusting these things. It's kind of fun to play with these mechanics and see the thing go up and down. And now we only have to get power and maybe a little bit of the left and right, like left slice or hook, out of that data instead of getting the angle and all that other information. So that simplified the problem and allowed us to get a much better experience that also introduces strategy into the game, because Cornhole has a strategic element too as a game, like where you're trying to land, the angle you come in at. So are you trying to hit somebody off the board? And it brought all that back in. So I think right
Well,
decision.
and CT nails it. This is slick control for not having a location bar. And I was talking to Tommy, and I said, Tommy, I think this works better because, like, I mean, I play cornhole too. So, like, outside in the yard at birthday parties, picnics. So, exactly what you just said. Sometimes you want to push bags off. So, you kind of want to go in low and with slide, or you get it to stick. So, I think this adds a little more element to the game. I think because it's one of those things where you don't have is it called a magnetometer? Is that what it's called? Right. So because you don't have that, it almost forced you to make the game better, it seems. You can kind of set your perimeters like you would in like a golf game before you go ahead and throw the bag. So my question is with the bag, it looks like he grabs the disc, right? So he comes back and then when he throws, is it measuring speed then at that point?
Yes.
So if I don't throw it hard, it's not going to go all the way.
Right.
But if I throw it, as hard as I can, and I'm assuming I'm holding the disc as I throw, and then it lets go when I let go of the disc. Is that correct?
Right. Exactly. Right.
Okay. So pretty simple there. So, yeah, you answered my questions with this. I think it actually is probably a little bit better because, like, if my 5-year-old's playing this, she can go, oh, okay, I want to put it there, and now I'm going to throw it type of thing. Whereas she's just going to go like that, and it's, going to go wherever. So
Right.
Can I ask you a question, John, about this real quick? I don't know if you I'm sorry. I'm like, sometimes I want to ask a question. I'm not sure if you would even know, but is this is one of the pack-in games, and I'm wondering, some people are kind of questioning, like, if this game's still being worked on this close to launch. Is the plan still for this to be available at launch, or is this like turned into? Okay, that's what I wanted to.
I mean, the game is done as a game the way it was working before. We just weren't completely satisfied with the experience of the throw. So we wanted to improve it, and we still have some time, so we can still make these improvements. And as a game developer myself, we're always wanted to improve it up to the last minute we can. At some point, QA says, all right, lock down, you can't change any features, it's just bug fixes now. And so you hit that point. And
so I guess my follow-up question to that would be, if the game is done, how come you didn't show the game? Why did you show this? I guess that would be where my head goes.
Well, what I said is the game was done in terms of the original mechanic of not having this targeting feature, and you just press the button and throw, right? And with all the limitations of that. So while they are working on finalizing the game in terms of lots of other things that are like the levels and the bug testing and fixing bugs that you do towards the end, we in parallel were working on this internally so that we could get it to a point where we say this is working great, this is how we want it to be. And once the developer has something like this, which is showing them exactly what we want, it's very easy for them to put that into their game. And we gave them a version of this earlier, so they were already working on the actual targeting mechanics, the visuals and all that, and we're just kind of fine-tuning the math algorithms. And
does the game need to
adjustments? Does
the game need to be recertified from doing this, or like as far as like its ESRB rating and all that kind of stuff?
Shouldn't be.
No.
Okay.
No.
I just wanted to get a clarification. That's all.
Yeah. If you're changing the content for there's specific questions that they're asking, and this doesn't really affect any of that.
So this is a pretty much, from what you're telling me, cut and dry. We're taking the existing game, what we have with the fancy graphics and all this, and we're just going to implement these targeting controls into that game, which won't affect, like it'll be ready by release if you would need to be released by October. Right. Right. So would this game, if you launched October 10th, would this game be ready?
Yes.
Easy enough for me.
So to kind of pile on to this question on it, I'm going to skip a couple questions here because I know we're starting to be crunched on time, and I want to get to some other questions on other topics. How easy would it be to manipulate this kind of control scheme to kind of work it into, say, something like bowling?
Oh, super easy. Barely an inconvenience.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Chuck will
I
be
got that
happy.
reference. Oh, really? Oh,
Bowling
really?
confirmed.
Fair and
All right.
inconvenient.
What about
Somehow-
Cyrus Martin's math fund? Could we
Somehow
work it
only
into that?
John
No,
and
no,
I,
no, 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 no.
somehow John and I are the only two that got that. I got
That's
you,
all right.
John.
All right.
And
Thank
I know
you.
you've partially answered this, so this may be a quick answer, but this was probably one of the more technical questions we had on the motion controls. Is how you're overcoming the magnemeter, the device that measures the direction and polarity of magnetic fields on your phone. With the controller not having one, what design techniques are you using with the gyroscope? And can you measure the force potentially by measuring the speed of the controller it's moving, determine the angle, the speed, and possibly the height of the throw? Or did I just butcher that question?
No, I get where you're going. I mean, what we were trying to do before, like I said, was extracting too much information out of it. And there's one of the things you get is you get a little more drift in the gyroscope without the magnetometer. And so the longer you're measuring, the more drift you get and the less accurate data you get without that feature. So you're better off keeping it short. And, swing's not too long, but also limiting how much you're trying to get out of it, because the muddier the data gets, the less accurate all these different factors are going to be that you're trying to pull out of it, the less they're going to align and make sense to what the user experienced. So by breaking it out into this targeting mechanic and just trying to get mostly the force and a little bit of direction, then that really solves that problem. We don't need to have super accurate data or super accurate positioning to be able to do that.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that people don't realize too is that in a lot of games, and like some of the Wii games, there are things going, some trickery going on under the hood sometimes, where it's not necessarily a pure physics simulation of your input data and the physical outcome. Sometimes there are ways that they do things, like in bowling, where there's actually kind of only so many outcomes that can happen, and it kind of just puts you into a bucket based on roughly some data about what you did, right? And we're doing better than that, but it's not always like, there's a lot of cheating that goes on in games to make the experience fun versus making it realistic, simulation.
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and change gears to the Karma engine, because I had some questions on this.
Sure.
Now, I know from a couple other things I've heard you say that it's not really like a game engine in the traditional sense. It's more like a philosophy that you try to work into the games. Like, what kind of steps do you take to try to work that into the games, and how many of the games are more compatible with that than others?
Right. So we are always looking at each game, and each game is different, but we are always, pulling out that lens. Actually, I have a lens here to remind me of my little.
Oh, wow. Hold on. Do that again, because now you've gone from pirate to Sherlock Holmes.
That's great.
Where in the world is
simplicity is one of them.
Alvarado? Sorry.
Exactly. And then the karma philosophy is another. And it is a philosophy. It's always been a philosophy, with the goal of allowing people at different skill levels to have fun together, and for people of lower skill levels not to just feel left out or run over and not having fun. So we are always looking for how we can make that happen in each game that we look at, and as we're designing it and as we're giving feedback to developers, and we just brainstorm and come up with ideas. And some games it's easier to do than others, and some games we have to make more major design changes if it's an existing game, for example, and in others it's simpler. So like a good example is Rigid Force, which is a single player shoot 'em up, right? How do you even make that multiplayer? And then if it's multiplayer, how do you make that so that a lower skilled player is going to be able to stay abreast with the skilled player? And our solution to that was to introduce this secondary element that you can control, that it actually is invincible. So your little brother or your girlfriend or someone who's not good at the quick twitch and all that can still be there enjoying an experience with you and helping you get through these levels. And they are hard levels, so it's a big help to have someone in that secondary role. And they can have fun because they're doing stuff, they're shooting things, but they're not constantly dying. So that was kind of one extreme end of an example of introducing a totally new kind of mechanic like that is a different role. So that's one way to approach it, is to kind of define some different roles in the multiplayer experience, and some of them are more challenging than others. So you kind of take the role where you feel more comfortable. Whereas some games like Pong, for example, it was pretty simple. The concept was, well, you can make the person's paddle bigger or smaller, and that's pretty simple to do, and it gives someone an advantage if they need it. If they're getting hammered, then they get a bigger paddle, so they can hopefully score some more points. So we just have to be creative and think about different ways we can bring that into play in the games. And like in Shark, we give you, if you're behind in score, you get a little hint as to when the pearl is going to come out, so that you can have a better chance of getting that pearl and scoring a bunch of points on that, or getting an extra life or what have you.
Yeah, part of my understanding was early on when you guys were talking about the Karma engine, you weren't really talking about it as more as like a design philosophy, but actually as a physical engine. But you just didn't have the budget or time to be able to actually do that before you were going to release the console. Was that pretty much like more of a time or money constraint to put a stop to it? Was it never really a thing? Is it something you want to pursue later on down the road?
Yeah, there are kind of two aspects to it. There's the one that I just described in terms of allowing people to play together just normally through game design and feature elements that are sort of static in the game. And then there's this concept of gathering data over time and being able to assess a person's skill level and automatically put them into the right roles or into competition with the right players, or give them the right handicaps. And that is more along the lines of where an engine, where actual code would come into play, and data storage and analysis, and data that the games could draw from to make decisions about how they treat players or how they handle players. And that's kind of more along what would be called an engine, and more along what we have in terms of like patentable ideas. And it's still there as a thing that we can do, but there's just some things you have to focus on getting right first before you add the additional bells and whistles. And so,
right, that makes sense. Yeah. Speaking of that, you mentioned patents, and I'm glad you did, because that segues into the next question on this. Is, given that you didn't technically use this, did you put any kind of conceptual or logistical patent in place in case you want to pursue it further on down the line and you don't want somebody else taking that intellectual property?
Yeah, I believe it is in part of in our patent portfolio, that concept that I kind of loosely just described. And Nick is actually more in charge of that, and the engineers participated in that when we were developing the technology, the concepts that we're going to try and patent, the technology that we're going to try and patent. But the actual filing of that is not handled by me. So that would be a good question for Nick in terms of like the details of that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But you definitely try to set out and establish, cover as much area as you can with your patents, even though you're not necessarily going to implement that immediately.
Right.
But like you said, kind of stake out the land, right?
Yeah, Nintendo does that all the time. So I assumed you guys would at least attempt to do the same thing on anything that was that you consider proprietary, so that you could use it down the road without interference, right?
Exactly.
The next thing that I had, and I'm going to skip the first question on here, was talking more about the frame rate in the games, how that comes into design concept, as far as what display resolution, number of players, things of that. What you guys take in consideration to try to keep the gameplay smooth and running at an even rate? Do you lower the frame rate? Do you only allow X number of players? That kind of thing when you're looking at a particular type of game, and how much is going on the screen at any given time?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of game that it is, whether how much it matters the frame rate. For a Twitch game that needs quick response, you want a smooth frame rate so you can get that feedback visually on the TV to your actions, right? So that becomes more of an emphasis. And for other games, say a turn-based game, a board game, or Farkle, you don't need a super high frame rate necessarily, just enough to have smooth animation. So it entirely depends. And so developers will put the resources where it matters. And if you're doing a Twitch game, then you're going to do a lot of profiling and trying to keep that frame rate high. And it's approached that way, just on a case-by-case basis. or maybe you use levels of detail to, in your models and things like that to get improved performance.
Right.
Or maybe you run your game at a lower screen resolution. There are lots of different tricks that you can use to achieve a higher frame rate.
Now, do you use do you support dynamic resolution in your I don't know if Unity, I'm sure Unity does, but do you do dynamic res?
So the games can change the resolution if they want to, but so far it seems like people just pick a resolution and just go with it, and then that decision is really based, like I said, on maybe trying to get more performance by going to a 720p versus 1080p. But there's no rule preventing any game from changing resolutions, but I haven't seen anyone doing that at this time.
I'm sorry, Dr. Blue. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
We need this.
Thank you, by the way, Daniel. Say I'll go back and look for that. I've got to rewatch so much material with Nick that I'm asking questions that were probably already answered by Nick. Then my apologies for that. At least on ours, I was busy monitoring chat so much that night I missed a lot of our conversation.
Can I follow up real quick on what Mullis was saying? He was asking about dynamic resolutions. What about dynamic frame rates? Like, is that a thing that you see in games, or is it being implemented in different games and stuff like that?
Well, some games have frame rates that change, and it's not necessarily because they mean to do it, but sometimes the action gets so intense that the frame rate will dip a little bit.
Mostly on Xbox systems.
Oh, wow.
So
or when
And
John's
Sonic
trying to
CD.
play Sonic CD,
Sonic CD.
it slows down so that John can figure out how to play it.
But you have to describe that as that's a feature, John. It's a feature. It's
but what
That's
about
the Karma engine at work?
So Cyrus, though, but Cyrus brings up an interesting question, actually an interesting point, because what I have seen developers do at times is they'll run their main screen at 60, but they'll run the HUD at 30 or something along those lines to try to compensate for not having so much on the screen that it slows down the main. Can you do that? Can you do that here in Amico development?
Yeah, you can definitely do that, because that's not really something that's dictated as a limitation by the hardware. It's how you program your game. You can time slice anything. Like we do that with AI a lot. Like it only tries to update the AI every so many frames, or they're on alternating frames, so they're not all doing it on one frame and causing spikes. Those are just programming techniques that are available to people for people to use, and so yeah, it's you can definitely do that.
Okay, well, keep it on that theme. Tommy's always talked about, very early on, he talked about the engines that you could use with the Amico, and he really honed in on Unity. But are there other engines that the Amico can support?
Yes, any engine that can output an Android APK can create a game for Amico. We support Unity specifically with lots of tools and code that they can drop right into their game. So other engines would have to implement those things themselves, or somewhere down the line we will eventually begin to provide more direct support for other engines. But yes, and we do have, while most of the games in development are in Unity, we do have a couple that are using different engines. A proprietary engine, one uses a proprietary engine, and another one is using Unreal. So they have a little more.
Stop, hold on. Whoa. Because I remember specifically, and again, you have to understand, this was a year and a half ago. We asked Tommy about that, so thank you for clarifying that. And he said the Amico's not built for Unreal Engine, and I didn't want to say anything because you could run Unreal Engine on a toaster.
Right.
So I think it wasn't like optimized. It's not really designed for it, but he still said you could make something with Unreal.
Yeah, he told us on NLG specifically no. So that was a straight no answer. But again, year and a half ago. So
wait,
and that was an answer that
sorry,
came
I was
actually,
monitoring chat. Can it run on Unreal Engine? Can Amico run Unreal Engine? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it can, because an Unreal Engine can output an Android APK, so it can run that.
Okay.
What performance you get out of it depends on how you approach the development. If you're using all the capabilities of Unreal Engine, it's not going to run fast on the Amico, if lighting and all that. So you have to develop.
Ray tracing confirmed, Cyrus.
Oh no! Don't go there! Don't go there! Don't go there!
So you have to
I'm
use
sorry, I'm
development
sorry.
techniques and the features that will perform well on the Amico. And it's
DLSS.
possible to do that in Unreal. So we have a developer that's very comfortable with Unreal, and they wanted to do that.
Wow.
So they're made some builds and did some experiments, and the first ones had a crummy frame rate, but then they started changing their approaches, and it got better and better, so to where it seemed viable that they could. You have to be careful about what you turn on.
It's fantastic.
Right?
That is.
So
As
that
they're going
said-
through and making the stuff in Unreal and stuff,
Yeah.
this is like all
That
stuff
said, they
being
have
passed
more-
on to the next phase.
Yeah,
of
they have
developers.
more work cut out for themselves because, like I said, they have to implement a lot of things that I provided in the Unity environment that they have to do themselves, and including a plugin or like DLL to communicate with the OS and to bridge between Unreal and the OS. So, but we give them all the support. We give them the code, and we give them the documentation and all that. And in the old days, that's kind of all you got. And like you would have to implement this stuff yourself, read the documentation that might be translated poorly from Japanese, and figure out the system and the hardware and all that. So they're kind of in that situation, whereas the guys using Unity, they are well supported with APIs and tools.
Yeah.
So speaking to that and the support that you're giving, this kind of brings up a cool segue, and Mike already called it. So I had two questions on this. I'm going to kind of roll into one sort of jumble question for brevity. So I know you had said something like all the developers doing launch games now had dev kits. So, and the ones that are working on games that are coming out a little bit later don't necessarily have development kits. What are you doing to support each of these branches moving forward as far as helping them get their games ready to go? Because I know you guys do a lot of in-house support as far as tools and general support to help people get their games ready for launch.
So developers that don't have dev kits can still develop, especially if they're using Unity and using the mobile controller. So they can get that and with an Android device or on an iOS device and connect over Wi-Fi to Unity running an editor and develop their game. That they just won't have the tactile feel of the Amico controller to kind of see how their controls feel on the actual controller. It'll just be the mobile phone version of the experience. But 99% of their game can be developed that way. Then the question becomes, well, is what I'm developing going to perform well on the Amico? Because they're running on a high-powered PC, right? It's going to be able to render anything at 60 or 120 frames per second. So they would need to either deploy to a mobile device that's comparable in horsepower to the Amico. That's one way some developers approached it, and or they can send us a build and we run it and give them profiling information back of these are the things that are taking up too much time and you're gonna have to remove those, whatever. And we do that when we help them out with profiling. And another approach is there's a regular kind of development board that's available that has the same chipset that we have on the Amico for the graphics and the CPU. And so some of those are in the hands of developers. In the early days before we had our own board completely working, we use those ourselves to test performance of the CPU and GPU. And so we sent some of those to developers and they could test their performance on those. They wouldn't have all the lights and all these other things that we have on the Amico, but they could test their game performance. So those are still in circulation with some developers that aren't launch titles.
Right. Fantastic. So we've already covered a couple of these questions that I had. So let's go ahead and go into the UI a little bit. Is that pretty much close to being final, or do you guys still have some tweaks that you're doing on that?
I'd say it's about like 97% final, and it's there and all its functionality and the art look and style is there. There are some art content is still being fine-tuned, and there's some OS hooks that still need to be hooked up for some things that are coming online now. But it's basically there, and we've gone through a bit of iteration on this over the last we're in the early couple of years and different approaches to it, but we're pretty happy with what I think some of you guys have seen it when you play the game.
I mean, I've seen it, and I've said in live streams that I've done, like, I feel like it's done from what.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
you're
pretty...
seeing it every day, so you know what's going on behind the scenes. So obviously, you have a lot more info than me. You know what needs to be done, but I mean, as a consumer, when I see it, it felt done to me.
Absolutely. And I think it's a fun approach to what normally is kind of a boring just menu on other consoles.
Yes.
And it's fun and it works. And yeah, so
got my 11-year-old's attention like right away. Like when we were at Crayola and we were at John's house and Tommy fired up the system. I mean, my son turned to me like right away and said, "Oh wow, I love this." I mean, and you know, that was he was like happy before we even played a game. So that's
our goal. That's our goal, and we talk about that. If in everything we do, if we can get a kid to smile, we've won. If our menus can make a kid smile, then we've won. We're trying to entertain people and give them laughs that they can enjoy with their family and be amused and be surprised. We approach everything we do with that mindset. So even our menu where you're just selecting what game you want to play.
Let me ask you this, John. So if families are able to smile and laugh and have fun and get that kind of enjoyment and to have a good time and take that away from an experience, and that can happen with things other than Amico, then why does Amico exist?
Well,
what I'm saying,
people,
so
why... people, kids especially love playing video games, and a lot of what's available in the video game industry these days is kind of catered more towards people with a lot of experience playing video games and that are good at playing video games, and some people don't feel comfortable trying to jump in there. So parents are not likely to jump in on Fortnite with their kids, or you guys are gamers, so you probably would, but there are a lot of families where that just wouldn't happen. And so we want to bring back that experience and opportunity for families to play together in video games, because video games are fun, but if they become too complicated, then they become inaccessible to some parts of the family, and then you can't have an experience together. So that's what we're all about, is trying to bring the family together to have a shared experience with the video games and have fun together, and then create those bonds that come out of that. And I have to tell you, I'm starting to choke up just talking about it, and this happens to me because this is close to my heart, this concept of doing something that's going to make the world better, because we're creating opportunities for families to grow closer together and improve those bonds, and that can only help them and make the world a better place.
These guys will tell you, I brought my autistic 11-year-old son up to Pennsylvania, and I choked up so much over the weekend watching him. I'm doing it now. See, even talking about it leads like you, because that what you're talking about is exactly, I want to get my kids off of their. It's fine that they have Switch lights. It's fine that they have iPads, but I'd love to get them off of those once in a while to come do something with the rest of us. And watching, handing the controller to Seth to watch him play Astro Smash, and knowing that this is a game that him and I are going to be able to play. Rigid Force Redux, him and I are going to be able to play. Him and his brother will be able to play with the industry. His brother 6 is the indestructible piece. I mean, those are the things that made me, kind of go, well, this isn't just about what I want out of the system. This is what I want to see him want out of the system. And I mean, I was emotional all weekend watching him. And watching his face light up.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
I get you, man.
I can't tell you how rewarding it is to see the videos of the people like at the Crayola experience playing the games,
Yeah.
the families playing together and having fun, and the mom saying that she's not really a video game player, but she had fun, and the kids are playing together. It's like, that's what it's all about.
And we got some of that raw from the live stream, which you were also, you know, in the chat on, and yeah, you could see that as it was happening. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think John is hitting exactly the right tone to answering that specific question that I had, because it's a question that people will ask, and I don't think they understand the intent and the motivation behind what is going on here. And I'm glad you got what I was getting at whenever I asked it. You know, there's room for other things out there, obviously, and they do. You know, they have great purposes and can do great things for families and all of that. And you guys are not saying we're here to replace Nintendo or whatever. You're here to do something because you felt like that was something that was, you know, maybe not given enough attention in the gaming space, and at least not the type of attention that you're trying to give it. So that was all I was trying to get at, and I think you saw where I was going there.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. what kind of world would we live in if we just decided to have an idea and go, oh, you know what? Some people might already do this with something else, so I'm not going to bother. Like what if everybody took that mentality? You know what I mean? It's just
Well, most people
crazy,
do.
Man.
You know,
The game chasers are in the chat right now. Why make a movie? Like, no, there's millions of movies. Why make a movie?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, well, why bother? You know,
There'd only be one console out there,
right? And that's most of the world. Most people, and sometimes people have ideas, but they don't pursue them. They think I can never do that, you know, or I can never accomplish that. It's, you know, it's kind of a neat idea. Maybe they tell somebody, and that's the end of it. But it takes people who are visionaries and dreamers and who can inspire other people to take an idea like that and bring it to fruition.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that Tommy has in spades. And you know, I've been friends with him for decades and known him over the years, and so I'm very comfortable with him, like working with him. But he, you know, he's the best boss I've ever worked for. You know, I'm working for him as opposed to working side by side with him. But he has a vision, and he has a passion and ability to inspire people, and he, at the same time, you know, he has a strong vision that he's pushing forward in a way where nothing's going to stop him. But at the same time, he listens to people. If someone has an idea or a criticism and maybe a suggestion, he will listen. And if it makes sense, he will change his mind. And so you feel as a part of the team that it is a team effort, and everyone's input is going into the final product. And with the strong mission that he's established, we're all on the same page and just bringing our best ideas to the table and going over them and brainstorming and making changes sometimes, or coming up with new ideas. And Tommy is so approachable. He's a genuine person. He has a personality that's very gregarious, and he's kind of loud. He's got his, you know, he's proud of his Italian heritage, and he talks a certain way. And I think he says he's from Massachusetts. He's like, they call themselves massholes. So, you know, there's a certain personality there, and which is different, maybe different from me, but I appreciate that. And he can kind of talk to and get along with anyone, and that's pretty important when you're out there trying to get your ideas into the world. But at work, he's very approachable, and, you know, I can talk to him, and we can bring up ideas or bring up problems, and without worrying that it's going to be, you know, going to get criticized for it, or you know, or not listened to or ignored. Very much the opposite. So, yeah, and you know, I can tell you specific instances where he, you know, changed his mind because I had a thought, an idea, and thought, yeah, that's a better way to do it. Let's go that way, and that's so refreshing. You know,
cornhole. We just saw
you know, let me just say something here, and to everybody in the chat, and to everybody on the panel. I haven't really talked about this before, but when I get people from Intellivision messaging me and saying, hey, we noticed that a lot of people in your chat and on this show are liking this, and we're going to consider that, and we're going to look at that as a team, and we're going to talk about that. That says a lot, man. That is a company who's listening to consumers that are plugged in to the product. There's not too many gaming developers don't. Maybe some indie developers might do that. Maybe some. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that most indie developers exist because there's so many of them. But Microsoft's not doing that. Sony's not doing that. Atari doesn't do that. They ignore you if you tweet them or do anything, or they'll ban you or whatever. So, I mean, that says a lot. And then I think that has a lot to do with Tommy's leadership at Intellivision, because that's the type of person he is. He's willing to listen to everybody, and that's sort of, you see that throughout the company, whether it's with you, John, or Nick, and Daniel C's always in the chat. Yeah, exactly. So there's something to be said with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, when we watch people play, and Tommy's always looking not to confirm the ideas he had and that we've done, but to see what actually happens and to correct if there's anything we see that people are experiencing that's preventing them from having that fun experience with their family that we want to have. So that flexibility is absolutely critical for something like this to be successful, to be able to see what's actually happening, respond to it, make adjustments, and come out with a great product.
Lineman Doc has been asking this question, and I don't want to ignore him. So can we address this? He was curious about, can there be an easier auto mode on Cornhole for young children to play with their parents? He's talking about, he has a 2-year-old that they can't set the perimeters, so maybe can the 2-year-old just pick it up and throw it type thing?
Yeah, so remember when we were talking about the whole Karma gaming philosophy and the Karma engine, that's present in Cornhole as well. And I don't want to go into too many details about that, but they should be able to play. Like I said, people at different skill levels should be able to play together and have fun.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Thank you for answering that. I am trying to definitely give everybody their question here. So
somebody had asked earlier. I'm sorry, John. I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. That was done.
I was just going to say, earlier somebody had asked what your favorite game is so far for the Amico. Like, what game do you keep going back to that you find the most fascinating?
I really enjoy Shark. I've played that a lot. It's fun because and my wife really likes it. She's not a gamer, but after the first time she saw it, is the first time this ever happened in my 30-year career of gaming, where she said, "Can you bring an Amico home so we can play Shark?"
That's cool.
And it's like, yeah, I could do that. So that game is pretty cool. I like the Hot Wheels game, which was Sideswipers originally. That one's a lot of fun, and my sons really like that one. They think that's one of the funnest games. You just pick up and play with your friends. Really good time. And I'm really enjoying the pool game. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see that one.
We have not.
We didn't get a chance.
There were games on those systems. We did not try. We have failed.
You know what?
The community.
I'm going to tell you guys something. No, I'm going to tell you this. I don't know if you guys know this, but me and Cyrus know this. Night Stalkers was on one of the consoles.
I know.
Yeah,
I saw it.
Yeah.
I saw it.
That game is really fun too. I haven't played that one in a long time, but
don't worry, Cyrus.
I know.
Is really fun.
I got a chance to play Battle Tanks. I did get a chance to play, or as I like to call it until it comes out, Armor Battle. I got to play that, and that was good.
It was funny because everyone was kind of packing up Saturday night, and everyone's saying their goodbyes, and Tommy and Mike are in the back playing Battle Tanks, and we just hear them yelling at each other, and Mike's getting excited, and I'm like, I don't really care about that
because he knew that was the other game I wanted to see before I left Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I didn't even get a chance to even see Battle Tanks. It kind of came up and went while I was upstairs. I think I was watching Tommy and Cyrus duke it out. I blame Cyrus.
Pool is one of the games, like I mentioned earlier, where we do some work and try to work with control mechanics and do some experiments and things like that. And I did some work on that one to try to make the game more Amico, using the features of the Amico controller in the best way to make the aiming and pool, really easy and fun. And so that I might be a little bit biased.
So can you tell us a little about that? Because trying to figure out, trying to kind of picture how that would work. Can you divulge the control scheme?
I think it's pretty safe to say. Now got me into territory where I'm not sure, but basically we're using a combination of the touchscreen and the disc to do kind of general, like kind of rough aiming and then fine-tune aiming sort of thing. So and you yeah, that's about all I want to say. I don't want to get in trouble. That hasn't been shown yet. So.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
I had to, I had to ask.
He just wanted to see if Tommy would run in the back of the room. No.
That would have been great, actually. I'd love to see that. That'd be funny.
Right. Abort.
John, I'm gonna ask you a question. A lot of the people in the chat I know are probably very interested to hear. We've talked to Nick, as someone from a financial standpoint of in all of this that's going on. We've talked to Tommy, and Tommy's going to say what he says, and a lot of people are going to believe him, and a lot of people aren't going to believe him. But from a hardware / or software side, when you look at how far the console is right now in its current state, would you feel comfortable with an October launch? Do you think it would be ready by October with everything that you guys have right now?
Yes, we've been planning for some months now on sort of focusing on the most important elements to be able to do a launch in October. So there are going to be updates to the firmware later on. We're going to add more features later on and things like that. Yeah. So it comes down to a matter of staging what you want to have, what has to be in launch and what can come later, so that you can have the time to create a solid experience for launch. And so there might be some things that are not there but aren't necessarily necessary. They'd be cool, but they'll become in a patch, sort of thing. So we've been planning for that, and so that we can launch in October, provided all the part stuff comes together. So it's always in development. You're always down to the wire. I don't care what kind of development it is, game development, or this is my first experience with hardware development, really, but any sort of a project, you have all these dreams at the beginning of all the cool stuff you're going to put into it, and then you start to work on it, you start to schedule it out, and some things take longer than others, and at points along the way you have to decide, okay, maybe this feature needs to be in version 2. You push some things off, you start to hone in, and at a certain point you start it's like a reality check of what's the most important stuff that we need to have done. Let's make sure that's totally solid before we look at maybe trying to squeeze in some of these other things. But you're always wanting to squeeze in some of the other things, right? If you do it, if you can get the stuff done in time or early, then maybe we can get in that feature. And it's not even necessarily feature creep. They're planned features, but maybe you plan to stage them later. So we just have to be careful about that and make sure that we have enough time to test the solid parts that need to be there for launch, and not introduce bugs by doing some things that we could put off till later.
Wonderful.
But you think you think that as it stands, this console is ready to rock?
Yeah, I mean, people are playing it now, and I can take it home and play games with my kids. We have people come in here and go in a test room and play games over and over again. It keeps, like I said early on, there were sometimes connection issues, but things have been really solid for a while now. It's
I said it. Smash JT said it months before I did. With what he played, with what I played, I would be okay with what I played if it launched today. Yeah. Maybe not everybody feels that way, but I feel like, I would be okay with that. Listen, PS5 comes out. The first thing you do when it plugs in, it patches. You buy a game. The first thing that happens, it updates, it patches. That's the industry. And you know what? And that's not a bad thing either, because, back in the 16-bit era, 32-bit era, you bought a game, it was broken. Guess what? It stayed fucking broken. Like that was it. You got a broken ass game.
Right.
And back then, you're working on development, you're working on iteration and polish until pencils down until the very last moment, like John said, with QA coming in, like you've got to stop now. We can't do anything more. It's ready to go. There is no end until the end.
Right. You don't have to go gold. Right? You don't have a gold.
Well, there is sort of a gold for like a launch, right? And with hardware involved as part of the development, then you have like kind of a bigger lead time where you have to put the pencils down, right? Because it has to go into manufacturing. The firmware has to be able to be put in on the manufacturing line. So it has to be done earlier than if it was just a pure software project. But when you get the game, regardless of having patches later or to add more features, we will not release it if you're going to have to patch it to be able to play. You will be able to hook it up and play games and the pack-in games and not even have to connect to the internet to do that, and be able to have a great unboxing experience and first gameplay experience. That thing is really important to us, the whole unboxing. Like what happens when the players or the consumer brings this thing home and opens it up, and how they connect it and how they can get into the games. Getting them into the games as soon as possible is our biggest goal. And we've gone over a lot of iteration on setup and little by little trimming things out that don't need to be done up front and can happen later, so that there's nothing in the way that doesn't absolutely have to be done in order to play the games. There's almost nothing that needs to be done. You can turn it on, plug it in, turn on the controller, and just pick a game and launch it, and you're into gameplay.
And,
right?
and you brought up a key point here that I think might have gone overlooked by a lot of people in chat. You said when you bring it home and you boot it up, you can immediately go into one of the launch games.
Right.
That didn't even happen on the PS5. You had to download Astro's Playroom before you could play it. Now, you got it for free, but it wasn't loaded on the system and immediately started installing when you booted it up. You're saying these are already fully loaded and ready to play.
Yes.
So there's no downtime from you connecting it up and playing, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, the PS5, you can't even use the SSD expansion yet. I mean, they launched with hardware pieces that were not enabled that they put on. So
Ninth gen is broken. Ninth gen's not ready. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest question is, do you the
biggest question is, what beard oil do you use, John? That's the
All right, so pretty soon here, guys, I have to bail because I need to
Well,
spend
listen,
some time with my
I do want to cover this question. We're at 2 hours, and we can wrap it up. And this was something that really hasn't been talked about a lot. As far as hacking and piracy on the Amico, what kind of type of measures are you guys taking for that? I mean, you hear about the Nintendo Switch being able to be hacked.
Right.
You can go offline and then download all their games and play all their games and not reconnect it, and you're good. So what are you guys doing as far as
VTech was
combat that?
Well, we're taking advantage of everything that Android provides in terms of security, and then doing some things on top of that for security in our back end and how games are enabled, for each particular console. And that is the domain of Bill Fisher, who's one of the original Intellivision employees from way back in the day. He's our VP of security, and he works with the cloud team and with the OS firmware team to implement the additional protocols that we have in place to, prevent piracy of the games, of pulling the games off the console or being able to play them on other consoles or other platforms.
Well, it wouldn't even work on another platform, though, would it? Because with the control, the emulate.
Basically,
listen,
no.
Emulating Intellivision controllers is tough. Like, has anybody tried to emulate original Intellivision games? It's a nightmare because of that controller.
It is.
So you guys are almost like protected right there with the controller. To try and hack that would be tough.
Yeah. So it's obviously one of the things that we pay close attention to, is we've got to be able to make revenue off the games that we sell.
Do you feel that your mustache encourages piracy?
Absolutely. It
that was for John.
Me into a pirate. And that's how it all got started, by me wanting to be a pirate. It was kind of the other way around. I felt like I needed the mustache to be a pirate. And,
That's the other Magic game that's coming. You have Microsurgeon and you have Mustache Surgeon. That's
right.
Fantastic.
Drink
I'm
it, John.
sold.
Drink it, bro. Drink it.
You don't need an eye patch.
I
Take
just
care
went
of yourself.
off camera.
No.
That was a preemptive shot off camera before
Oh,
that.
no, that's not how.
I'm not
Those were
doing
not
another
the
one.
rules. Those were not the rules. Those were not the rules.
I think he's had enough, Mullis.
Man, he's done a dent in that bottle.
Oh, I want
That stuff is not light. That's a pretty solid whiskey.
I want to say something because I saw a video, another YouTube channel, commenting on our party that we had last Friday, and that they were really negative about Tommy going around and interviewing people and thought that was terrible. I don't know why, but they particularly called out when he showed my mustache close up and saying that, oh, John looked like he was uncomfortable and Tommy was forcing this on him, whatever, and showing his mustache close up. And you know, I admit to being proud of my mustache and maybe even to the extent of vanity. And so my discomfort with him showing it close up at that moment was that I hadn't really trimmed it up for that occasion. So it was a little bit ragged and stuff. I didn't want him to get in there too close and you know, see my nose hairs or whatever. But I had no issue. I was not uncomfortable with Tommy coming in and then showing the close up.
Yeah, I don't get that at all.
As far as like feeling like he was bullying me or something crazy like they're saying. Tommy and I go way back. We're friends. You know, we bust each other's balls from time to time, tease each other, and it's just part of our relationship. And in these interviews, I tend to be a little reserved because I don't want to speak about things, like I said before, that we haven't announced yet or whatever. So I will just answer the questions and not try to like go off on too many tangents myself. But in that particular moment, he had told all of us before that he's going to do a video during this thing, and he's going to record it. Last time he did a live stream, last time we had a party, and it had poor quality because it was live streamed and the Wi-Fi was not good. So
you know what, John?
We did
I
a
want to
video.
interrupt you. Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. California has some serious internet issues. I have a friend who lives in California, and whenever I play games with him on PS4, it's an absolute nightmare.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's
I know who you're talking about.
Anyways,
You're talking about black metal, aren't you?
Yeah. Anyways, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, you know, he had talked about that in an earlier company meeting that he's going to do some videotape and talk to people. And this time he's going to not do a live stream because the quality was bad. And that way he'll be able to edit out, you know, the dull parts in between or whatever. So everyone knew, but not everyone is just, you know, that great at being in front of camera. So they're a little shy or whatever, and some more than others or whatever. But everyone was on board with what was going on there. And I knew that it was my turn. Someone had told me, "Oh, Tommy wants to talk to you next." So I went over there to where he was talking to Nick and whatever, and was ready to be on camera. He surprised me a little bit with going that close to my face, but it was no big deal. It was no big deal. I was just like, "Oh, come on, not too close."
John, the truth is, those are not serious people that they really are. They're not serious people to even worry about.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even give that a second thought.
Well,
I really enjoyed that video.
They look for any reason to criticize Tommy is what I've seen.
And everybody.
Thank you.
And everybody.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's not worth any. It's not worth
we
any more
appreciated
attention
the candid tour
Yeah.
and banter.
Absolutely.
It seems like a
You know
really
what I
fun
liked?
place to work.
Well, and didn't you guys recently win an award or something of like
We did of like best place to work. We won some awards for that.
best place to work in the video game industry or something like that? I'm sure Tommy had tweeted about it.
It was like it was a California best work environment, something.
Listen, Phil Adam had a beer in the office. How many companies allow you to do that? Like, I'm just saying, like, I've never, I work for myself now and I run my own company, but like, I've never worked for anywhere in my life where I could be like, oh, I'm just going to crack this beer in the office and not think twice about it.
Yeah. and that was, we don't do that normally during the week. We're not all drinking beers and coding away, whatever. But it was a special, luncheon. So that, something fun, but, yeah, I think that one of the reasons this is such a great place to work is so we have this strong mission that we're on together, and Tommy has managed to to really create a feeling of that we're all important members of this team that are in this adventure together to accomplish this mission. And like I said before, he listens to everybody, and I do the same with my team, and anybody can bring up ideas. So there's a real sense of just creativity bubbling and freedom to speak and bring up ideas or bring up problems or bring up criticisms without feeling like you're going to get in trouble. That's some crazy pathological environments you might find at other development studios. So there's nothing to not like here, and we have a great space that we're in, and we're just having fun. We're working very hard, but we're having a lot of fun doing it, and just really proud to be part of this team that's going to bring this to the world. And we just can't wait for it to be in people's hands and to hear the stories. We already get emails from people to do our customer service that they're looking forward to playing this with their kids, and they tell us their stories about growing up with television and all that. And it just really further inspires us and gives us, the inspiration to just continue working hard to get this into their hands.
Absolutely.
I need this in my house for my family. I mean, that's
thank you, John, for being part of this. Really
absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on here. Thank you so much for the time that you've invested in the product, and for being so candid with us tonight. We appreciate every minute.
I hope I hope as far as questions goes, chat. I hope we were able. Someone at Anthony had asked, had said we did ask some tough questions, so I'm glad we were able to get a lot of those heavy hitter questions out of the way. But dude, John, thank you so much. Not just for having an awesome mustache, but for just being a part of the process and bringing this console. My 5-year-old has played it. My 15-year-old of all people, who I did not think was going to give two shits about this thing, loved it. My wife, who literally right now is training for a bikini competition, does not play video games, sat down and played it. And after, by the way, I asked, hey, honey, do you want to play this? And she's like, no. And then later someone comes down and is like, oh yeah, hey, your wife was playing Shark and she had a blast. And I was like, and I asked her later on, I said, do you see yourself playing with me and the kids? And she's like, absolutely. I mean, this is somebody who spends 2 hours at the gym and just does not play video games.
Yeah.
So for her, I mean, I really think somebody asked me the other day, I think I was live streaming, and they said, well, hardcore gamers aren't going to like this. And I'm like, I think they will though. I really think hardcore gamers, what is a hardcore gamer? You know what I mean? That term gets thrown around, but to me, a hardcore gamer is just somebody who genuinely enjoys video games in all aspects, whether it's, retro or modern or Call of Duty, and they just want to have some fun and escape. To me, that's a hardcore gamer. And to me, I think from what I've seen with my 2 eyes, I think they're going to like this all the way down to casual. So thank you, John. Thank you for being part of this. I think this is so cool, man, that we have a brand new console that's coming out that for years we said, it's just Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo. How cool would it be for another player to come involved? And it's in television. And thank you for just being part of that. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Put up HTK's message real quick.
Where's he at? This one here?
Yeah.
Yes. So John, do you have it? So John, do you have any final words before we head out for the night?
Oh, I've really enjoyed being on the show, and thank you guys for having me on. It's a real pleasure because like I said before, I try to be pretty reserved in the comments I make, and even careful when I'm in the chat. And it's nice to be able to come on here and talk with you guys and share a little more detail about what I do and what we're trying to do and the mission, and put it in my own words, and try to answer your questions. So and having the freedom to do that, and not feeling like maybe I should not say anything.
Right, like your lawyer is behind you.
Right.
And John, I think I speak for all of us. Anytime you want to come back on, you are more than welcome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, we're so far along now that it feels so much safer for me to be able to just talk more freely about what we're doing. Right. It's not like in the early days when we were, cards close to our chest about some of the technology and plans and things like that. So it's pretty nice to be able to come on here and talk to you guys about it and share my passion for what we're doing.
Oh, trust me, both me and Mike couldn't have been more excited when we knew you were coming on. We're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I gotta get to work. I gotta start writing up questions.
Yeah, Nick did some serious yeoman's work getting a lot of these questions together.
Yeah, let me hammer this out real quick. Swami, thank you so much, man. I appreciate the support, you being in all the Amico After Darks live streams. Awesome. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Yeah,
I just want to apologize to John for insinuating he wasn't a real human being. Obviously, he is real. I'm willing to admit that we're all wrong sometimes, and
Sigh more often than most, but that's okay.
All right. Yeah.
All righty. Well, I'm gonna wrap it. I'm going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you very much. We are actually going to be going on a 4-week break. So Amico After Dark.
My wife thanks you.
Yes. Amico After Dark will be back the last Wednesday of August. We will be back. I'm going to take that time to do some more edited videos. I have a lot of Amico content I want to drop as far as previews go for a lot of the games I've played. And a lot of the other things I did. Thank you, Anthony FX. Shout out to Power Up Nutrition, best pre-workout. I told you, bro. I wasn't playing around. Anthony FX became a customer, and I'd listen. That's for another stream, but he knows what's up. Do you even pre-workout, bro? So, but we'll be back.
Start getting your pre-workout, man. I've been dragging.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to talk to you about that too.
We'll be back the last Wednesday of August. Maybe we'll have a guest on. I think we're going to go, no guests that weekend. We're going to cool on the guests. We've had so many guests now. So many guests, all of the guests. If there would be more guests, the amount of guests these guys get on Amico After Dark is just unbelievable. There is no show with this many guests. But no. We will be back. I'm going to concentrate on some Amico content that I want to put out, some edited content. So if you guys, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Go follow everybody here. Geeks with Cash, Mike Mullis, Retro Advisory Board, Cyrus. I have a message from DJC before I end it. He was not able to make tonight, but he left us this message, and I'm going to close it with this, guys. We'll see you in 4 weeks.
What's up, Amico After Dark? Just coming to you via fake satellite up in northern Michigan, where I'm camping. It is hot, uncomfortable, but I'm having a great time because there's plenty of tab, and I'll be playing some Intellivision bowling. Yeah, and I'm backwards because I'm filming on my phone. Anyways, what's up, crew? I hope Nick had something to eat. I hope Rab made a good point, and I hope Mike is doing fabulous without our big fall. Anyways, everyone, including you, John, and the rest of the cast and crew. Oh, and what's up, John Alvarado, and your mustache. Anyways, DJC signing out from up north.